Oh, interesting.
So, I was somewhere just recently and they had one.
Thumbs up. Okay. I'd like to call this Saline City Council work meeting to order at 6 p.m. on September the 19th. I would note for the record that the clock up above is no longer functioning, so please don't reference that this evening. It looks like it's stuck at about 4:15 or so. Members present this evening are Council members Kamara Sulak, Seo, Delorco, Dillon, Kraus, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, and Mayor Marl. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole and Clerk Royal. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments?
So moved.
Moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Dillon to approve as submitted. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to public comment under the Open Meetings Act. Any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. The record will reflect there are no citizen comments this evening. Then we will proceed to the one discussion item, which is our proposed ethics policy. The city manager has provided options 1, 2, and 3. I'll allow her to comment on all 3 options, and then we'll do a round of questions. We'll start to my left this evening with Councilmember Kraus and end with Councilmember Delorco. We'll see if we can develop consensus. If we do, we will take action at one of our subsequent meetings. City Manager O'Toole, the floor is yours.
Thank you. After hearing our discussion at our last meeting, it sounded to me like council was still split on the concept of either an individual third-party sort of ethics investigator or the creation of a citizens committee. So what I've presented here, option 1 is kind of that original idea we had been floating, which is the Citizens Ethics Board. Option 2 is an ethics ombudsman, which is that third-party separate investigator. And then option 3, if a compromise is needed, would be taking any complaints that come to city council and then deciding at that time whether council would hear the complaint, whether it would go to an ombudsman or whether it would go to a citizen council at that time. So the general language of all 3 of those is the same as it has been across each of the iterations, but the difference is, some unique language around the implementation of those 3 different scenarios is what's presented. So looking for consensus on which option we'd like to move forward with, and then any final language changes on that individual option.
Easy enough. Well, we have plenty of time, so we'll probably do multiple rounds of questions and comments. Let's start with just questions regarding either option 1, 2, or 3. Councilmember Kraus, I'll begin with you.
Thank you. Okay, so it's confusing. There's a lot of red line. There's a lot of, we've talked about it quite a lot. So I think it might be a good idea if we have like a mini summary on each of them, even more so than what you just gave. For example, for option 2, you said third party, but there's language in here that still says chosen by a majority council vote. So it's not technically a third party unless I'm reading it wrong. So their response might be from a third party, but we put the third party there.
Correct. I mean, and there's no way around that. I mean,
Okay.
any party we choose would have to be collectively assigned by this body. I mean, in essence, what we're doing with the creation of this policy is council is taking a right that is afforded to it as a council body and saying, here's how we want to delegate out that authority. So it all has to start with council making a decision about who is being assigned that investigatory authority.
So that has, like, you can't do that yourself. You can't say, I'm going to hire John Doe attorneys and take it completely out of here. Because from my perspective, I want it completely taken out of council's hands. Whichever one of these options affords us that is the one I'm going to support.
I mean, yes, I guess we could write the language to state that the council, authorizes the city manager to engage someone, but that's tricky, right? Because I have a spending threshold, so if that contract's going to go over a specific amount, technically we violated the city charter, and I am your appointee, so it just kind of makes it a circular argument of who's appointing who to what.
Okay, so I just wanted to state that, though, it sounds real nice when you say things like the third party would be ruling, but we are the ones who would be putting that third party in there. So
Yeah.
it's not really a third party ruling. Call me a cynic, but I know this town.
Yeah.
Okay, so that, I see what you're saying, though, that is tricky, you're right. So for option 1 then, explain to me how that differs as far as, dumb it down a little bit. This one would be the most where council is taken out. Number 3, for me, way too much council involvement. I don't know how, that would never fly by me at least. So 1 sounds like the one I'm leaning towards. So that one seems to be the most,
The citizen committee?
where council is the least involved. Am I reading it right?
Well, I mean, council still has to technically appoint those officials. And one thing that I'll note, because Councilmember Dillon brought this question up before this meeting, the way that the alternates are intended to work is basically we assign 5 people, 3 as board members, 2 as alternates. And if a complaint comes in where it's determined that someone can't be available, one of the primaries can't be available, or may have a conflict because of their relationship with someone, the alternate would be subbed in for the duration of that complaint hearing. That way you're working with a bench of 5 to get a team of 3.
So there's no way comparing 1 and 2, as far as equally choosing, council still has to have that triage.
Council still has to have that final sign off on who's being appointed. I mean, in option 2, it really needs to be clear because there's a direct financial component to hiring whoever that party is. So they would have to have a contractual relationship with the city, which council would need to sign off on.
Okay, so, so back to option 1, then, we would still, people would apply, I assume, or we appoint, or however they
Correct.
come into the fold and want to be passed on for this, or passed.
Yeah, people would apply. I would review for consistency with the skills necessary for that position. And then ultimately, I would make a recommendation, or whoever in my office would make a recommendation to council on those appointments.
Okay. Okay, that's it for now, thanks.
Very good. Thank you for those questions. Councilmember Kamara Sulak, questions for the city manager?
Yeah, just a couple. A couple of my questions were answered. I'd prefer to have the least amount of council involvement so that there's no appearance of, impropriety, and so that we're not, so that we can be consistent and fair and maintain public trust. So I'm vacillating between option 1 and option 2 as well. And I appreciate all the work that you put into this. It's doubled in size with all the redlining. So all three of these options have gone through legal. And they can't express an opinion. Or
Well,
can
I mean,
express an opinion that has
So-
their perceived least liability and, you know, the clearest, I mean, this is hard to
Yeah.
understand, so that it's clear and fair.
Well, I mean, I can't speak for legal counsel, but yes, at the beginning of this initiative, the response was really like, you know, this is an authority of council. They don't need to assign that investigatory authority elsewhere. They could just set parameters for how to deal with it. But the direction from council has been, no, we really want to have some other body or entity that is responsible for looking at these things. So in that regard, definitely, the committee approach is something that there is some precedent for. I can't say that I've done much research on if anyone has like an ethics ombudsman person. I think it's maybe more popular in higher education than municipal government.
In your previous city manager position, did you ever run into, or did they have anything like this, or run into a situation where you had to work out of a policy?
And no, there's a bit more language in the city charter there, and some communities do have ethics and the handling of like ethical complaints more specifically referenced in their city charters. Our charter is fairly sparse.
And old. So at a later point, when we do update our city charter, we could tighten this up, depending upon which option.
If you want to, yeah, if we're talking about implementing something like the creation of either an ombudsman person, physician, or an ethics committee, absolutely, in the future, we could make more direct reference to that in our city charter.
Okay.
That would require a vote of the, the electorate.
I would definitely like to do that at a later point when we do dive into updating the city charter. I'm going to leave it at that then, and thank you.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Seal, any questions for the city manager regarding the three options that have been presented this evening?
Just some comments, if you will.
Let's hang on to comments, Mr. CEO, to the subsequent round. I want to get questions out of the way, and then everyone will have an opportunity to provide some comments and opinions, if that's okay.
Okay, it's fairly straightforward to me. I have no questions.
Very good. Councilmember Dillon, any questions for the city manager?
So just general, broad, 1, 2, 3 type questions. I do have one that previous council members have mentioned about having less council involvement. And I guess I just want to understand that point in that they just mean in the selection of participants. I guess because along the way, council is involved. I mean, this is a public hearing, correct?
Yeah.
In front of this body, the council would be the final decision-making body.
Yes, correct. The way that all three of these options are written, any complaint that is received comes to the council body immediately. Whether it's then also going to a board or commission or ombudsman person, that's separate in those policies. And then whatever is concluded from the hearings of that body or that individual comes back to council, because again, council is the only body that can take action.
Right. Okay. And then, so generally, where I'm concerned with this Board of Ethics, one is that we're asking people to volunteer for a 3-year term that they may never serve on within their period of time. That's a big commitment for a maybe. And so I don't know whether, if we were to go this route, we sanction the committee when the need arises and we rotate it through of, okay, this group is doing this complaint and maybe they can reapply if there's another one that comes up. But it just seems sort of weird to have people standing on hold. Because people's lives change over the course of 3 years, or even a year. And what seems like, yeah, today this would be good, and then all of a sudden it comes about, and we have 2 people bow out. And I mean, I know that's why we have alternates, but then we're up to, okay, we only have the exact number of people now. And now we're in a situation where the clock is running. So I almost feel like it would be something we would do on an as-needed basis and not establish it in advance of it. So that's one of my big issues. The other one that I have an issue with is, so we're going to create this board and we're going to say to them, okay, here's the information, process it. Do we have any idea that these people are even remotely qualified to do that? And I look at it from the standpoint of a jury. You know, people are, you know, yes, we would go through a process of voir dire and, you know, sort of figure out that people were qualified to be there. But who's instructing them? Who's guiding them? Because we're not doing that, you're not doing that. So are they just sort of off on this island making their own rules and such? I mean, they may not have any sort of municipal background. They may not have any legal background. So I'm kind of a bit concerned about that in this sort of a setting.
Yeah, I guess my comment to that would be, as we talked about previously, we plan to do an annual training. If this is the entity that we're creating, a board or commission, we would host an annual training. Our legal counsel would provide that training. The city clerk would be the liaison to the body to provide, simply to make connections between, you know, the provision of documents and information as it's coming in. I do believe, you know, in this case, my office would have to be available to respond to any concerns or questions that were needed and point them in the direction of any resources that became necessary. But really, the heaviest focus would be on training. And again, finding people that do have some background or knowledge of municipal operations, law, ethics, or really just public policy in general.
Right. And so I just wonder how big that pool really is and what those, you know, and it's like, well, you just have to wait and see. But I don't want to go down a path to realize, oh, nobody applied. Or we did receive 4 applications and, you know, we don't really feel like it's making the mark. And so then what do we do? So then do we have to come back and revisit the issue and move in a different direction? I do like the idea of an independent person, and I know we had floated out, you know, I know you're using the
Ombudsman. I practiced it so many times before this meeting.
Ombudsperson.
Yeah, and I know that person.
I still got it wrong. Thanks, Dean.
No. So I just trying to figure that aspect of it out of, I like the idea that we could sort of pin that into, okay, we know that somebody in that category is going to have it just by definition. They would be already trained. And so that onus isn't back on the city of, okay, well, did we properly train them? Did we advise them the right way? I think it's already, you know, checked that box. So that's the piece that I like about that. And then as far as, you know, who appoints who and how that piece of it works, I think that we just need to kind of work through that a little bit more.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, any questions for the city manager regarding the 3 options that have been proposed this evening?
I believe the question you've answered was the one is that all 3 options provide the benefit of that it has to go to council, which I believe you just answered for Mrs. Dillon. That's been
Correct.
That's been my concern from the point that it does not get held up in either your office or the mayor's office, whatever. It comes specifically to our body, which has the authority to do this. As in terms of the ombudsman person, couldn't we use our attorney?
We could. I mean, again, though, the issue there is it's someone we are contracting with.
Right.
And I don't know if we want to use an attorney that is already assigned to like labor or general counsel, particularly if something is going to be contentious. I feel they may not want to get involved.
And for me, I think I like option 2 because I don't believe every single concern or complaint goes to the level of having to be done by a 3rd person, because it could be something else that needs to be dealt with internally that isn't necessarily an issue, which we need to talk about, because there could be an internal issue that has to be dealt with by the city manager, and it comes to us because of some concern of that it comes directly to us. The other thing being,
That's option 3.
confidentiality. Well, let me back up to what it is. I'm more the concern about if an issue comes to us, depending on how it's made or concern, is it only coming to us if it's regarding a council member, an appointee, or?
It's only coming if it's a council member. This policy does not cover appointees or staff.
Okay.
Staff are covered under a separate policy within our personnel handbook, and then we would need to determine if at some point you ever wanted a policy like this for other boards and commissions. So, yes, I mean, perhaps there needs to be some clearer language in the policy that states, upon receipt of a complaint, I suppose then it would have to be reviewed by my office to determine if it was a complaint against council or a matter for myself and our human resources team.
And the only reason I bring that up is because on the first page, where it mentions government decision means a determination, or actually government contract, and it talks about the person serves as an employee or appointed elected official of the city of Saline. I mean, the point has been crossed out. It just sounds like we're kind of mixing. It's the second paragraph under section 1-2 under definitions.
Yeah, but the term does not include a contract pursuant to which a person serves as an employee or elected official. So all that means is a government contract. By government contract, they don't mean my contract and your dealings with me, because I have an employment contract with the city.
I'm just from the perspective of mentioning employee, and it starts to sound like we're talking about employee who's being brought into this, so.
Yeah, no, the elected or official is the specific reference.
That's it for me in terms of questions. I'll need more appointment or concerns or comments about the option you select. I'll do that later in another question.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gearba. Councilmember Delorco, questions for the city manager regarding option 1, 2, or 3?
Just in terms of questions, I want to make a distinction between option 2 and option 3. These feel relatively novel to me because we've spent the majority of our time looking at option 1 and nuances thereof. But my understanding is that if we look at option 3, the ombudsperson version, chapter 5 in the ethics ombudsman, it talks about members shall serve without compensation. And you guys are talking about having to contract and pay someone. So this runs contrary to what you're saying.
It's entirely possible I just missed amending that section in the option. So, yeah, that would need to be struck because in this case, I can't imagine we'd find someone willing to perform that task who is highly skilled at that task for free.
Okay, so that's a typo, in other words.
Yeah, what section was that?
Chapter 5, ethics ombudsman, in option 3.
In option 3. Okay.
It talks about them having a background in municipal governments, municipal law, and their ethics. And then, City of Saline members shall serve without compensation. The ombudsman shall be appointed until such time as council body, blah, blah, blah. So maybe that was just a cut and paste error?
Yeah.
Okay. So both option 2 and option 3 provide the opportunity for this person to serve. The difference between option 2 and option 3 being is, in option 3, the go-to point person to handle these complaints and investigate these complaints and then make a recommendation to council or dispense back to council their opinion is handled exclusively by one individual, which is the ethics ombudsman. And then in option 2, it basically is a broad encompassing version of the policy where it has 3 different options. One is for it to be handled by council, second is for it to be handled by the Board of Ethics, and third is for it to be handled by the ombudsman or ombudsperson. Is that correct?
Yeah, though, I think that's option 3 is the 3 different scenarios. Option 2 is the ombudsperson.
Okay, okay.
There's ombudsman in both 2 and 3.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because it has to, the policy has to describe either the creation of in option 3, it has to describe either the creation of a ombudsperson position or the Board of Ethics as well. So really, option 3 has a lot of the same language as options 1 and 2 respectively.
Right, but option 3 gives
3 different scenarios.
opportunity
Yeah,
not to use either the Board of
Correct.
Ethics or the Ombudsman.
correct.
Okay, thank you. That's the only questions
Yeah.
I have for now.
Okay, very good. Are there any additional questions at this time before we get into opinions and preferences from council? Okay, there appears to be none. Let me kick it off. I do not have any questions. City Manager O'Toole, I appreciate you providing City Council an option 3 for consideration. My statements this evening mirror many of the comments that were made earlier by my colleagues. In the spirit of compromise and cooperation, I could be in a position to vote in favor of either option 1 or option 2. I would be a pretty firm no on option 3. Much, as was said by Councilmember Kraus and others, I'd like City Council to be, really not to be involved in the investigation process. I have no objection. I think it's perfectly appropriate to notify council, but council deciding how a complaint should be investigated, I think is improper and could prove problematic. So again, none of these options are perfect, but I could be in a position to vote in favor of either 1 or 2. If the consensus is option 1, as was expressed at our last meeting by Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh and others, before I would be able to vote in the affirmative, I'd want to see the bylaws written in advance so that could be considered at the same time as this policy. I'd also note, to an exchange I believe you had, Ms. O'Toole, with Councilmember Gearbaugh, I do think moving forward, it might not be prudent to do so at this time, but moving forward, I do think board and commission members should also be subject to an ethics policy. It's true that most of our boards are advisory, but we do have a number of boards that are capable of making some pretty significant decisions that have a broad impact on our citizens and our community. I think specifically of the Tax Board of Review, ZBA, and Planning Commission. So in saying that, maybe that is an issue that we could discuss and bring to the attention of our board and commission members if and when, and I hope it's more of a when, we have a retreat or an event that includes an invitation to all of our various board and commission members. And the suggestion I would make, if there's no objection from the dais, at our council retreat 2 weeks ago, we empowered you, council members Dillon, Del Orco, along with City Treasurer Cole and Community Development Director Harrington, to be part of a working group that establishes our approach to strategic planning either later this year or in the first quarter of 2023. We've talked about having more board and commission involvement in that process. So again, unless there's objection from the dais, maybe that group can talk a little bit more about how to broach this subject with the various citizens that serve on our boards and commissions. I do want to give them a heads up. I don't want them to be blindsided, but at the same time, I do think moving forward, they should also be subject to an ethics policy. Let me start at the end, and we'll have opportunity for everybody to share some remarks and offer a preference on either option 1, 2, or 3. So I will begin with Councilmember Kraus.
Thank you. So just tailing off of what you just said, though, Mayor, if we were to do that for our boards as well, that we're still moving ahead with this. We're not holding this up any further. Okay, just wanted to be sure.
That would be my preference, yes.
Okay, same. So something that Janet had said, I think you asked what we were thinking about. What did you say? You said something about what we had said.
Oh, you had asked about council's involvement, and I guess I
You wanted
wanted
to
to
know.
understand at what point.
That's fair. Okay, so for my opinion on that is that picking people or helping triage who the best people brought to us are, which would stream from you, is one thing, but being a part of the adjudication process is where I'm drawing that line. We shouldn't be ruling or deciding what a punishment would be for one of these, because there's too many factors involved in that. So picking people, like when, it's just like a jury, I think of it like a jury. I think of like an OJ jury, I don't know why I always think of that, but those people were not experts on that jury. So, you know, and maybe that's a bad, okay, maybe that's a bad
not the best
example. But I'm just saying, I mean, they need to know how to read English. And there's plenty of people in this town who know how to read. You don't need any special qualifications to read the policy and try to figure out what council is supposed to do, and then what they didn't do, where they went astray, or whatever the grievance is. So I think that's what I'm thinking. Regular people who can read, you know, maybe I'm being too simple. But in answer to your question, sure, bring us the people. You know, people apply, and you bring the people to us, and then we push some forward based on the city manager's recommendation. But that's where I would want council's involvement to stop. We should not be investigating our own. That's a big no from me. I'm in favor of one.
Easy enough. I appreciate the clear and concise answer.
One thing I could also note, if we go with option one and a committee is what you all decide to form, we're also talking about this body setting the bylaws. So keep in mind, we're not bound to Saline as a jurisdiction. If this body's primary preference is to find people who are qualified, we may be able to find a conglomeration of 3 people or 5 people that have more of a skill set in this if we're willing to go outside of our jurisdiction.
U of
for
M
that.
does have resources for that as well. They've got some legal areas that often do this sort of thing. I don't know if I can speak that they've done it for a municipality before, but they do have legal resources that are farmed out sometimes. Some of the law students like to do that sort of thing. It's really big. I use them for a situation we had with Will. And that's free. They don't charge for that. So, and it's a good way for the interns also to get their, you know, so. I definitely don't think it should be Saline-centric.
Very good. Councilmember, Commander Sulek, Councilmember Kraus indicated a preference for option one. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on the 3 that have been presented this evening?
Well, to keep it simple, I concur with a lot of what Councilperson Kraus said. You know, to keep it simple, to do, you know, to make any rulings, council involvement, none whatsoever. I'm against that. Some investigating. I'm feeling more comfortable with that. There's no way to get around that. So my leaning and preference then is option one.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Councilmember CO, your comments or preferences on the 3 options that have been presented this evening?
Let me ask a clarifying question. You said option 2, the ombuds person, would be a hired person?
Correct.
So we'd enter a new contract and agree to pay them?
Yeah, if that was the option we selected, I would basically work up a narrative that described the duties, and then it would be an appointment like any other.
I'll go with option 1. To me, option 3 is very similar to what we're doing right this moment. And we can't decide now. Why would we decide in the future? So I'd go with
That's a
option
fair point, Jack.
Jack wins.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for that, Mr. CO. Councilmember Dillon, preferences or thoughts on the 3 options?
So can you just give me the quick recap of option 3? Because it's sort of a hybrid of everything. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand exactly, I want to make sure I understand exactly what triggers which actions.
Sure. So in option 3, the way that it would flow, a complaint comes into the clerk's office. We determine if it is related to a council member, not specifically an HR matter that needs to be handled internally. At that point, council is notified of the complaint, and instead of either having an ombudsman hearing or a committee hearing, council would just, at its next regular meeting, decide if they wanted to be the body to consider the complaint, they wanted a commission to be appointed, or they wanted an ombudsman position to be appointed. That would not, council would not be investigating it until such time as they determined they wanted to be the body to investigate it.
Okay. Okay, so I think I understand that. So I mean, I guess the only thing that appeals to me about option 3 is that this isn't a one-size-fits-all scenario on either side, because we don't know what the ethics issue, I think Mr. Gearbaugh had mentioned this. Is it something internal that, I feel like there's a lot of different levels to things, and the one piece that we didn't talk about that I don't think references in here is what happens when there is a city staff member involved, because they have different rules and they have an expectation of privacy, and we're talking about having public meetings. And so understanding how all of these like hand in glove together.
Well, that, you bring up a great point, because we don't know the nature of the complaints that are come in. Some of them may be rather mundane and easy to deal with. In an option 3 situation, council could easily just say, we're going to take up this matter ourselves, and we're going to say, hey, so-and-so, don't do this again. It's pretty straightforward. In the other scenarios, maybe the responses are the same, but they just take a little bit longer to get to. In a case where a staff member may be involved, absolutely. That's going to come back to council. It's maybe subject to closed session regardless. So when we're talking about creating option 1 or option 2, if anything revolves around privileged information, those bodies can't know it. An attorney might be able to, but they'd still only be presenting it to you as a council body.
Right. So I guess that's what I'm trying to understand. What option here sort of is more all-encompassing to those situations?
I mean, I wrote option 3 with that kind of in mind, hearing everybody's concerns and the potential pitfalls of this. I definitely understand where folks are coming from with wanting to kind of remove council from that initial consideration step. This is the best way I could think about doing it, just having council consider what type of response they want to give, not necessarily trying to find one response for everything.
Right. I mean, I guess because I sort of look at it as there's a complaint made, council gets notified, and we would, I mean, in my mind, the process would be that we sort of triage it of, hey, you know what, this is a, hey, don't do that ever again kind of a thing, where it's just, whatever the case may be. Or we say, yeah, this needs an actual investigation, and so it needs to go to the next tier. And so at that point, it moves on to that body, and we're done with our part until we get that recommendation, because then that body does their investigation, and then their recommendation and findings come back to this body, and at that point, this body, because in all 3 cases, in options rather, it would always come back to this body for a final say as to how to proceed. And
Correct.
close out the matter.
Yeah, in option 1 or 2, it always comes back to city council, because you are the only body that can actually enact any of those things.
Right. So, but then what are you saying then? What does option 3 do?
Well, option 3, if you keep it within council, you just skip right to the action part.
Right. And so I guess that's the piece that I'm trying to figure out right now. I just feel like we're making this so complicated by trying to create a board that may or may not ever need to do anything. And, it's just sort of a weird thing that I just feel like, okay, we've had this is just a process. And it's not necessarily the policy, it's the process of, okay, we go from this. And I think that's what I liked about option 3 was it seems like it dealt with it more in that way of, okay, we understand how this is going. And I don't think council has, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, so please help me. I don't know that council has any more ability in option 3 than it does in option 2.
They can adjudicate. We can choose to adjudicate.
Yeah, I mean, in option 3, council can say we don't want to assign it to the committee or an ombudsman person. We want to hear the claim ourselves and host their own hearing.
Okay, so if somebody complained that I was using the city copy machine to make, copy my kid's school report, and I made 10 pages, somebody complained about that. So we're going to go through an entire process for that. I mean, it seems as though, I guess I just want to better understand of, like, where is that line? What do we think warrants going to the next step? And I will be just adamant about the fact that I don't think that having a body of community members is the right aspect for this. I think we're going to end up hitting way too many roadblocks with that concept of like trying to make sure, I mean, look at our boards and commissions now. How many times do we not able to get quorum? This is something that's going to be very time sensitive when it comes up, and it's going to need immediate attention. And so I think addressing it in that time frame is when it needs to be done. Things we appoint people now, well, 3 of us could be gone, 3 new people come on, and they could have issues. So then you're going to keep flipping a board now that you've trained them, and they're waiting, and then all of a sudden, sorry, your time is up because now you do have a conflict. It just seems like a really I don't know, just a really big hassle to just sort of be in the what-if pool.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do hit on something in terms of issues that are more direct or less serious. I'm not sure that the first 2 policies really address that thoroughly, and that may be something we need to look at if that's even possible within the context of what we're trying to create there. But yeah, in creating option 3, the thought process for me was, if something small came up, council could just say, we've received this information, we're making the determination to handle the matter as a council body. And then from there, deliberate if they wanted to do anything further.
And for me, I think that's where we sometimes get stuck. And I think that's the biggest element of this for me, of sometimes we don't actually know where exactly our lane ends and the weeds start. And so if somebody can say, hey, you know what? We think that is in the direction of directing staff, so let's just pull it back over. I mean, that's something that this body can talk about. To go through this entire process seems a lot.
So you tell me if I'm wrong, Councilmember Dillon. It seems, based on those comments, you would be more inclined to options 2 or 3.
Correct.
Okay. I don't mean to muddy the water, but she brings up an interesting point.
We're in a swamp at this point,
Yeah,
right?
you got it. Yeah. I'm not sure we can go much deeper, but I may get us there. Councilmember Dillon does bring up an interesting point in reference to her example about she makes 10 copies for her children. And I'm not accusing you, I know you wouldn't do that. Certainly that's not proper, but at the same time, it's relatively insignificant in the grand scheme of ethics complaints that could be leveled against a council member.
Yeah.
So I do think, I do make a distinction between something like that, where there should be a statement made, there should be an emphasis that behavior cannot continue or be repeated, but it doesn't warrant a full-blown investigation or any sort of draconian punishment.
Yeah, I mean, and again, right now, the way that these are written, the only one that would give us any leeway in how to respond would be option 3. And I'm not saying I couldn't sit down and try and figure out if there's a way to make it work in the context of those other ones, but, I'd want to know that there was consensus for that before I went and wrote like a 4th and 5th policy.
Okay, yep. Sorry to muddy the water, but she made a good point, and I wanted to piggyback on that. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, preferences or thoughts regarding options 1, 2, or 3?
I mean, the one that clarified for me is, I didn't realize in option 3, the intent was that we would adjudicate. I mean, part of my thing is I really didn't want council to adjudicate it unless it came back from a third party or a different source that investigated it. I agree with some of my council members that creating a committee that lives for 3 years, I'd rather have it be that it gets created as a result of that issue. Because the goal here is not to create an intent that we're going to have ethics hearings every week or every month because of a need for a committee to review that. I look at option 3 giving, and the other reason why I look at that is giving future councils the flexibility because we may all not be here at some point in time. And they'll be able to either keep this or remove it immediately, but if it's so strict in the way it can approach, generally policies like that aren't followed well. And that's why I look at option 3 being an option that I support. It's just that it's not committing us to a committee. It's the third party, even the ombudsman person would be a good example of being able to, council would be able to refer that to our city attorney to investigate if it was a smaller issue, and that comes back to be discussed. If it's a big issue, then yes, you bring about the committee to address that. Would we as a group just meet together to adjudicate someone? I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, again, in option 3, the intent would not be if there was a significant event, council was performing its own hearings and investigations. It was really just how do we deal with those smaller issues or really the quick fixes, so to speak, just a redirection.
Well, and even in that case, I think where you're proposing it, the public's going to know what we're doing because we're going to make a
Correct.
decision at that meeting. So we get 3 options of what we want to do. And the public thinks is going to go, okay, you council are taking this under your own advisement. What does that mean? And I think that in itself would be an indication to keep it quite public in terms of we're investigating that issue. We may not disclose what it is. Is that
Well, any complaint would be public knowledge, it'd be subject to FOIA.
okay?
So, no, I mean,
Any of the
yeah,
options. Options
in any
1,
of the
2, or
options,
3.
correct, yeah. So, you know, in that situation, the public would know the complaint was, you know, misappropriation of our printer, and, you know, I think most people would understand that that's the type of thing that we could resolve internally.
And that's perfect. I think that's what I'm looking for, is to give that option to whatever council sits up here to be able to do that, and based on the level of concern. But as long as the issue will be disclosed publicly, it really makes it makes the issue there real for the public to know, where we have not really disclosed ethical issues because we haven't had a policy in order to properly do that. This would allow us to do that.
Sure, so would, then, in your ideal scenario, we would have a policy whereby council receives the complaint, does at its upcoming board meeting, whatever the next regular meeting is, consider the complaint and whether can be just, you know, resolved there and then, or assigned to either a board or an ombudsman person.
That's kind of, I think that's what your intent is.
Yeah, though maybe it sounds like from council's perspective, you'd like to decide on either if we're creating a committee or an ombudsman person position, rather than having both of those options available in the future, or is that?
I'm fine with having both options available because depending on what the cost is, we're already paying for that attorney as part of our thing. But if we really want to have a third independent review, then you would go outside and get a different organization to come in, or that board of review. So you might actually have 4 options.
Hey,
So-
I'm only writing one more policy.
Yeah.
But it really is, your option 3 works well. It just allows for that 4th option of an internal ombudsperson versus hiring somebody from the outside to serve.
So, Mr. Gearbud, and if I'm being obtuse, my apologies. So basically, you're in favor of option 3. Okay, it may require some minor modifications, but that's your preference. Very good, thank you. Mr. Delorco, I have 3 for option 1. Councilmember Dillon would, I think, be amenable to 2 or 3, and then Mr. Gearbuz for option 3. What are your preferences?
I certainly respect all the points of view that have been raised at the dais this evening. My position is that the option 3 provides the most opportunity for ambiguity and things being subject to interpretation and getting bogged down in differences of opinion, whereas option 1 provides a clear process. I've heard many times that we need processes in how we handle things moving forward. And in absence of those processes, we have continually spun our wheels because we don't know how to handle situations. This removes counsel from the investigation portion of the claims, and it was further made stronger at our last meeting when the mayor asked that the council reserves the rights to write the bylaws for this committee. We're not setting up a committee that is just left to its own devices. There's going to be an opportunity for training, and there's also Certainly, if we have the ability to write the bylaws, we can certainly require that we expand our borders and go outside of the city and look for people with this area of expertise. All of the options provide for transparency. All of it is subject to FOIA and public record. There isn't any attempt to conceal anything from the public with option one. I can see all points of view, but I myself am most in favor of option one.
And real quick, Mr. CEO, before I yield the floor, and as I stated earlier, I could be amenable to option one. I think option two would be my first choice, but in the spirit of compromise and comedy, depending on how the bylaw is written and if there are certain tweaks and adjustments made to the proposed policy, I'm sure I could be in a position to vote in the affirmative when council considers that action. Mr. CEO, do you have some additional thoughts? And I do want to be mindful of the time because we've got about 10 minutes left.
All right, I just have a question. So we go into closed session to discuss the sale of property. And we have two bids on the floor, and the attorney discusses with us the pros and cons of both of them. And one of the two is my buddy. So after the closed session, I go back to my buddy and I say, here's the issues surrounding the sale of this property. And if you want to get the property, here's what you need to do. Can we adjudicate that appropriately, even though it happened in closed session?
That's state law. That's actually a
Violation of state law?
a violation of state
Okay.
law. So that would go straight to the prosecutor's office.
Right. Okay.
All right, real quick, and I know Ms. Dillon, you had an additional comment. There was some very good, I thought it was a very good discussion, and many of you made some excellent points. I just want to confirm everyone's position one last time, because obviously everyone reserves the right to change and modify their opinion if they deem appropriate. I have Kraus, Kamara-Sulak, CO, and Dillon in favor of option one. Is that still correct?
Not Dylan.
Excuse me, Del Orco.
Yeah.
Okay. Kraus, Kamara-Sulak, CO, and Del Orco in favor of option one. Ms. Dillon, either option 2 or 3, but I think a preference for 3, probably. Mr. Gearbaugh, preference for 3. Marl's first choice being 2, but amenable to 1. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. So who is paying for training for these individuals? That's a city expense?
Yes.
So we're saying we don't want to pay somebody, but we're willing to pay for training for people. That's sort of a trade-off of things of like, well, we don't want to spend money to hire a professional, so we're going to pay for lay people to come up to speed. I don't really see how that balances. So I just wanted to make that point. I do have several comments. I think we've talked about these. I've talked to the city manager about some of them. In some of the language that carries through any of the documents that I would like to, at some point, kind of readdress a little bit, just for a little bit more clarification. And just understanding that, like, I think the city manager, if we're looking at option one, and that's what seems to be the majority at this point, I really would like to see very clear understanding of the role of those alternates and such.
I think
that could be established, in the bylaws versus this, but I just want to make sure that we understand. I just am not sure right now that how we're going to form a committee that really doesn't serve a purpose at this point in time. It's just sort of a just because aspect. So I don't know that, like I said, I am concerned about that we form the committee now, we establish the bylaws for these people. We're all on 2-year terms. I mean, that turnaround can be so quick, and life changes for those people that are on it. I just think that we need to really think through what that piece of it's going to look like, of when that and how that committee is established, and what those guidelines are going to be. So that is something that I really want to be, understand about. Like I said, I've talked to the city manager about a few things. There is a reference in these documents to the city's electronics use policy. And I had suggested to her that, we state when that policy was dated or some sort of connection to it, because that policy could definitely be revised at some points. And I just want to make sure that everybody's even seen that policy and understand it's not attached to this document for like that ready reference point. I don't know where people would find it if they wanted it outside of us who may have it. And just understanding, because right now we're bringing the clerk into this process, and she's sort of the gatekeeper for it, and understanding that aspect of it, that it seems as though once again, what happens if this is an internal, if it involves staff? How does that work?
Yeah, I agree. I've already made a note for myself to change the language around receipt of complaints to involve a check of the city manager's office to confirm whether it is truly a matter that needs to be determined by either the commission or the ombudsman person, or if it's an internal matter for human resources.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then there's a couple of times when we talk about references to timeframes. I'm not sure where we landed with 180 days. I'm not sure where that came from and
I think
how
that
was
copies EOC,
And
the
such.
Equal Employment Commission's same standards for reporting.
So I feel like that's a really small window in certain instances. And the one I'll use is any kind of sexual harassment. It sometimes takes people a long time before they can bring that forward and understand those channels. And I would hate to see a door closed because they didn't prescribe within that 180 days. Or understanding that there was some sort of a violation. What if we don't know about it immediately? I mean, it's not like, oh, I witnessed her do this, and this is, the complaint. Sometimes these things filter through processes. So I want to be a little bit more mindful about that and understand it a little bit more. I also don't like, there's also a reference in there of within a reasonable period of time. That's very subjective.
Not that defined.
So I'd like to make sure that we talk about, just honing in on some of the language a little bit. And then the last one that I wasn't sure about is when we talk about under penalty, the last one says, other sanction as deemed appropriate under the circumstance consistent with the law. I guess that I don't know exactly what that would be, what that looks like, of what this body could decide they wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, that would be at the advice of legal counsel, what other options were available at the time, given the nature of the complaint.
Right. It just seems very open-ended, and so I don't know whether this body at all has the wherewithal to prescribe any kind of a sanction. Like, just say, okay, well, we thought that you deserved, this. And I don't know how that actually fits. I mean, the other ones are definitely a little bit more definitive.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut this off, but we're running really close to our next meeting. We got about 2 minutes. Let's do this. Councilmember Dillon obviously has some legitimate concerns, and I think some of the verbiage can probably be tweaked and strengthened, and some points can be actually defined. I don't think, regrettably, we're going to be able to move as quickly on this as perhaps any of us would like. City Manager O'Toole, correct me if I'm wrong, but our previous conversation relating to option one, which we appear to have consensus on tonight, there was statements made 2 weeks ago or last week and yet again this evening that council would like to see bylaws at the same time we consider adoption of this policy. With everything else that you have on your plate, it seems like that's going to probably take about 30 days, a month approximately, to draft those bylaws and bring them back to council. So realistically, we're looking at our first meeting in November. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that gives folks ample time to reach out to the city manager to propose some changes or modifications. Does anybody have any really timely, pressing comments to make about this policy before we adjourn and convene into our regular session? Councilmember Kraus.
Just real quick, Jana, I mean, there are some good points tonight, but I think this is one area you don't skimp. You don't worry about the money, you don't worry, total transparency, adjudication away from council's hands. This is one area we don't skimp on.
Any additional comments? Go ahead.
There is a 180, 300-day rule with EEOC, so just
Yeah.
verify that. So I'm not sure which, even though we're using 180, there's a 300-day thing too, so I'm not sure what that concern is.
Okay, I can double check that.
Double check what that is.
Very good. So again, reach out to the city manager, and this issue will likely be considered again for discussion and potential adoption at one of our November meetings. If there's nothing further to discuss this evening as it relates to the proposed ethics policy, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn at 6:59 p.m.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Kraus, seconded by Kamara Sulak. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This work meeting is adjourned. We will reconvene into regular session in 2 minutes. Now I lost hearing. I'd like to call the Saline City Council meeting to order. If you'd please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Members present this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, Council members Kamara Sulak, CO, Delorco, Dillon, Kraus, and Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Assistant City Manager Getzman. Is City Engineer Humphreys here? I don't believe she is. Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Briggs, Community Development Director Harrington, and DPW Director Searles, along with Police Chief Radzik. The rest of you who are in the audience this evening, we encourage you to sign in the back to my left. You can also retrieve a copy of the agenda on the back table along with hearing devices. Mr. Gearbaugh, I believe you wanted to add traffic enforcement as a fourth discussion item under the discussion portion of our agenda. With that being noted, would you like to move to approve the agenda as amended?
I move to approve it as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Dillon. If there are no additional amendments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We come to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments on agenda items? The record will reflect there are none. Then we proceed to the, I'm sorry. Yep, Mitch?
Yes,
Comment on an agenda item?
I do. Well, as you guys know me, my name is Mitch Rode. I'm the owner of Union School and the CEO of Quantum Signal AI, and I'm an engineer with many degrees and over 25 years of professional experience. I'd like to share something I shared with some of you a week ago. I moved my family to Saline in 2003 and my business to Saline in 2010. Back in those days, I was lured here by a friendly town with good schools, a positive business environment, and government relationship. It used to be very, very easy to do business here. I had a great relationship with the city, and contracting was very easy. I don't know what happened. It has changed so radically in that time, I can't recognize it, especially with regard to the building department. And this is related to the code change for this evening. I found our building department to be slow in permitting, have aggressive and adversarial inspectors that use gotcha tactics, have questionable knowledge of engineering and their own code, and they use extensive outsourcing for even the basic reviews. Every business I am talking to is saying exactly the same thing, which is that it is not working, that there is harassment, that there's intimidation, and that they do not want to speak out because of fear of retaliation. Contractors that I talk to do not want to work in the city of Saline anymore. I've been subject to this personally, even after partnering and bringing jobs and investing millions of dollars in this city. It has taken me most recently months to get a permit to change some basic windows in my school. It only happened when I complained, and we're finishing that up, and that's kind of sad. I think that there are fundamental problems that need to be fixed here. I know some of you heard me last week because I've seen some motion, and I certainly hope you're taking action. Right now, I think that the building department is the biggest threat of prosperity to the city here, and that I have confidence in Mr. Harrington, and I support him 100%, but I think he inherited a mess. I'm going to offer my suggestions in writing over the next couple weeks to Ms. O'Toole, Mr. Harrington, and Mr. Mayor, and I will CC the City Council. I don't know tonight why we're talking about code changes when there are such basic, fundamental, underlying problems with this department, and it seems so broken. I think the council is time to intervene. I think it's time to demand changes, and I think it's time for accountability. I think every business person in Saline wants to see things change. They want to see Saline succeed, and they want us, and we'd like to see us, we'd like to help you make it happen. Help us help you make it happen. I am happy to end my comments here and to stick around after the meeting to answer any questions as to my comments. But I wanted to get that out here on the record this evening because I think it's super important, and I think everybody needs to hear it, and I think the entire town needs to hear it. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Rode, and between City Manager O'Toole.
Mayor, it's Dr. Rode.
Doctor, excuse me. Between City Manager O'Toole and Mr. Harrington, perhaps you can comment on some of the doctor's concerns when we get to agenda item 22-225. Are there any additional comments, citizen comments at this time regarding agenda items? The record will reflect there are none. Then we proceed to the one and only presentation of the evening, which is an update from our healthcare task force. Councilmember Kraus is the chairperson of that committee. Would you like to begin? Take about 10 minutes. Council, you should have a hard copy of the PowerPoint presentation. There should be 7 copies up at the dais this evening. Councilmember Kraus, if you'd like to take 10 minutes or so to go over the PowerPoint, then we'll do a round of questions. And for the record, if you could also acknowledge the members of the task force and those individuals who are present who have helped with your initiatives thus far.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. So we're really excited to be here tonight. It's long overdue. My apologies for that. I'd never realized how much work it was to have a day job in addition to all this, but we have a great team. So I first would like to introduce everybody. Bethany Lem is my co-chair right now, and she works, actually this gets rid of one of our slides, so I'll just run through this real quick. She works, she's a health educator at U of M, and she works with substance abuse. Sue Couch has been great connecting with the senior center and trying to be a voice for that group of people. She's a retired research administrator, same job that I have at U of M, so we are kin in that manner, but she's also sitting on some other boards and is happy happily getting more involved in the city. Carol Heft is a retired elementary teacher. She's born and raised her boys here, and she is going to be a wonderful addition. She's already been taking a lot of surveys out into the community. Jamie Fear, Jamie lives in Northview. I don't know why that's relevant, it's not. She works for Henry Ford, so she's been a good connector there. She's also got some great ideas moving forward. Caitlin Scheibel, did I say your name right? Scheibly, I should have asked you beforehand. She's got a super long fancy title. Hang on a minute here. She just got a new job, and she is going to be amazing as this task force moves forward. She is the department manager for systems of care for stroke and STEMI. Do you just say STEMI? Oh, heart attack, sorry. STEMI, heart attack, sorry. I didn't see that one coming. Anyway, so through the state of Michigan, so as far as policies, processes, what we can do, what we can't do, she is going to be a great voice for that. Let me see who else I have in here. How do I do this? I'll just talk really loud. So here we go. Heidi, we have Heidi is an adult nurse practitioner at UM, so she's got that viewpoint as a clinician. Kelly Shanalice works for the School of Public Health, also a Saline 88 grad. Never would have thought you'd be helping out in the city back in the day, right? Woohoo! But she's got a great perspective from the School of Public Health and some things from there. Marlene Radzik, our chief of police, is also our staff liaison, so she's been a big help. And last but absolutely not least, second to last but absolutely not least, Jack Steele is our recording secretary. And then Jennifer and Nancy Gage are our interns. They're both students at Saline. They have a dual enrollment at Saline High School and ECA, and they have done a ton of work for us over the course, just keeping track of documents and paperwork and connecting dots, and I cannot thank them enough. So that's everybody who showed up. I think most of our people were able to show up, not all of them, but most. Anyway, moving on. So that's our people. So we were established in 2021. We had 3 missions or aims that we were tasked with, and you see them on the screen here. So I'm going to flip. Our first mission was to conduct a thorough needs assessment to understand what we needed. We can't fix a problem we don't have. And so before we dove too far in, we had to make sure that we indeed had a problem. We started with our first survey. We had 418 folks reply and 37 focus groups with anecdotal evidence, anecdotal stories that explained how and why the lack of health care in Saline has affected families, not like it used to be. So much has pulled out over the years. Survey number 2 is going around right now. We only have 117 responses. I'll admit it was slow for us this summer. We had a very busy group. I don't know that that's unusual in the summer, but we're hitting a little harder right now. We've got people out with scanned QR codes, lots of different things, so we're picking up those numbers. This current survey will be open through the end of October. And so the reason survey 2 is super important too is we have a healthcare company that we're talking with right now that we'll talk about more in the slides, and they are very interested in more local data. So when I say it's important, they want it. They're waiting for it. They've asked. So that's what we've got for that. Survey 1 summary. Skip over my people. Here's some numbers for you. 418 people replied. 48% of the respondents indicated that they had a recent medical care deficit, and what that means is they foregone, I never know, my husband's an English professor, you think I'd figure that out, for a reason, and the reasons all pertained to not here. They had to either go somewhere, their provider moved, or was combined with other providers in a different city, so it all had to do with not being here local and too long of a drive. And that number is telling. Specialty services that specifically were mentioned, there were quite a few mentioned. There were 7 that came up over and over and over again, which we'll talk about in the next slide. And then 36 focus groups. I might have lied. I think I said 37 on another slide. So I had people come who didn't want to, who wanted to host at their home, and so we would have focus groups where instead of just filling out a survey, they actually gave anecdotal evidence. We had one person who talked about their husband cut their leg almost off in a farming accident. Had Saline Hospital not been here, they would have died. That's how tight the time was. And so I keep thinking of that, like, okay, that's far on this end, but still, you hear stories like this, especially if you're talking about accidents in the southwest portion of Washtenaw County. Okay, let's see here. Mission number 2, our second, and that's gonna be Caitlin's gonna come up and talk about this, what we're doing to cover our second mission, which is listed there.
Thank you. So we're using the feedback from those initial surveys and the information we're going to get from the additional survey. This is the 7 areas that people have spoken the loudest about that they want to see us try to bring into the community. Urgent cares with extended hours and robust services, lab work, emergency room services, mental health services, as we're seeing that play out as a big player in the communities, physical and occupational therapy, specialty services, including geriatric care and OB-GYN and pediatrics. So these are the things that people would like to see closer to home, that they don't have to leave the actual community to go seek these aspects of healthcare.
Thanks, Caitlin. And like I said, there were others mentioned on the first survey, but these are the ones that kept coming up over and over again, so wanted to make special note of those. Sue Kelch is going to help me with the next slide. Mission 3 was to start to cultivate relationships with our healthcare organizations, and we will talk more about who we have already collaborated with, what worked, what didn't. But the key here is not going to be just depending upon healthcare organizations coming and bringing hanging up a shingle and opening up their office. That's a long game thing. So for right now, we're going to have to concentrate on collaborating with other local entities we already have and think about more health and wellness, not just healthcare. Sue?
Good evening. We cannot talk about healthcare delivery without also touching on health and wellness. For a healthy community, not only has access to good healthcare delivery, but also to a healthy lifestyle delivery. Saline has abundant resources that contribute to the health and well-being of our community, and Dawn has highlighted these 4, including the Saline Social Services, the Saline Parks and Rec Center, the Saline Area Senior Center, and the Saline Schools. We could also include the Saline's Farmers Market in our park system as other examples. All of these collaborators offer health and wellness enrichment that contribute to a healthy lifestyle. The Saline Social Services offer resources and access to those in need. The Saline Rec Center offers fitness classes, organized sports activities, parks and playgrounds for recreation and festivities. The Saline Area Senior Center offers targeted fitness classes, adult enrichment, and fun outings. And the Saline school system offers educational opportunities so our children can grow up as contributing members of society, maybe even choose a profession in healthcare, and also offers adult enrichment classes. And finally, Saline offers a weekly farmers market with healthy, local grown food and a community garden through the schools for those who would like to grow their own produce. I believe the Saline Area Healthcare Improvement Task Force, along with these collaborators, is now poised to take the next step. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. I want to spend a moment to talk about Mission 3, the conversations with local healthcare organizations, and update everyone on where we've been. The first group that we reached out to was IHA. It's a little bit of a difficult situation with them. They've been in Saline and they've left, and they've tried to come back, and then it didn't work. And so I think that we went as far as we could with IHA. Mr. CEO made a statement at one of our council meetings after the deal fell through with the property on Main Street or Michigan Avenue. So I don't want to beat it a dead horse, but suffice to say that our IHA probably that won't work out for us. Mr. CEO, did you want to say anything else about that before I move on to Michigan Medicine?
Probably right, not right now with IHA, just that we've explored opportunities and not been successful in completing those negotiations.
Sounds good. We'll move on. I work for Michigan Medicine, as do several of our other people here. We had a great talk with 3 of the top CEOs at Michigan Medicine. They were super welcoming, and they want to talk again in the future. Michigan Medicine plans very far out. They've already done their 5-year plan. So right now they're concentrating on building their new hospital, which is on the campus by the other hospital. They are not looking to expand right now into Saline or any other city. I mean, right now they've got their 5-year plan already done, so we should have probably asked that years ago, and then we might have had more from them. I know right now Keith Dickey, who is one of the CEOs for strategic planning, was super nice, helpful, wanted to speak to us again anytime we're ready. They didn't close the door. They are interested in keeping their Michigan Medicine location open and bringing more clinicians in, but as far as a different or larger footprint, that was not in their strategic plan. If you want Michigan Medicine to come, you got to start now, working on 5 years from now. They don't do this last minute sort of stuff. But again, he left the door wide open and was super happy to keep talking with us as the years go on. Henry Ford Health, I'm going to be real careful what I say here. Henry Ford Health is very interested in finding where their place in life is, kind of wedged between Michigan Medicine from the north, east, west, north of Ann Arbor, and ProMedica's down in the south. There's this swath of geographical territory that is yet ungrabbed for, whatever the term is. We have been talking with them quite a few times, and we will continue to do so. That's about all I want to say on that right now. I don't like to say things, I know I've heard people say before, well, I'm not at liberty to disclose, and I hate doing that, but when you're talking to somebody, we just want to be real careful that we don't over-commit, over-comment, say the wrong thing. They are still very interested in finding out if, when, and how they can be a greater part of Saline's healthcare. That those discussions are ongoing. And then who else? There's ProMedica, there are Caitlin, or Heidi, I can't remember who was talking about who's buying up whom, and it gets real confusing. So I'm not, and I'm Michigan Medicine centric, so there are other organizations that the group will continue to reach out and talk with, even after the task force is over, and hopefully we can become a permanent committee, because there are still organizations who need to be spoken with. We just haven't got to them yet. They're not great. ProMedica's for profit. There's some problems there, so you know, it's kind of hard to know where to go next, but there are other organizations that we're still needing to talk with. Barriers, let's see here. Caitlin's going to come back up and talk about some of this. The certificate of need, I'm not sure what we know about certificate of need. I printed this because I don't want to misspeak. A certificate of need is a regulatory legal document that allows a hospital to open. It's even if Henry Ford, for example, wanted to open a hospital here, they can't, because we are within X number of miles from existing hospital beds. I don't know, there are some ways around that, so those, you know, it can be tricky, but certificate of need is a national thing. These are legal documents. If you have a certificate of need state, when and how you bring new hospital beds in is very heavily regulated. Chances that we are able to ever bring a new hospital to Saline are very slim because of the certificate of need. And so from then we pivot and we find clinicians, or like Sue addressed, health/wellness, you know, a holistic, what can we do? We can't bring hospital beds, okay, but what can we do with our existing resources? So that's kind of what is driving, one of the big barriers is that certificate of need. Caitlin?
Thank you. So when we talk about barriers to healthcare, a lot of times the focus is on underserved populations and, you know, affordable healthcare coverage or access to care in healthcare desperate communities. But barriers are bigger than that. Barriers can be, I can't get my child to their appointment because the office doesn't have hours outside of my working hours. Or I can't get to a fitness center because they don't offer a class when it's available for me to take it. So when we're looking at barriers, we have to kind of look big picture. Yes, we need to make sure that we're serving desperate populations and that we're offering healthcare access equitably, but there's kind of a lot of nuances to that. And we are a certificate of need state. The state of Michigan does have, you can look that up on the website and get more information about how that works. It's a process, it's a committee, you have to apply, and they have to prove that we need more hospital beds in a certain geographical area. When we're concerned about market saturation, people would ask, why do we want more healthcare in Saline when you can just drive 10 miles down the road to two of the biggest healthcare facilities in the southeastern Michigan? But the reality is that doesn't always work for people. Another huge barrier to healthcare is transportation. We have a lot of people that need assistance getting to those appointments. So something we've discussed and would like to see is, you know, coming up with ways we can help people understand what what they have for assistance to get transportation. Let's break down the barrier so they can get to their appointments. Also, post-pandemic, we're looking at healthcare's changing. We're looking at, healthcare entities are figuring out how to staff their facilities and looking at what they can do to spread out their resources in an equitable manner, which means maybe altered hours, or they're, shuffling clinics and merging clinics together so they can get enough providers together to care for the patients that they already have within their system. So the question, are we too late? I don't think so. I think there's a lot of opportunity here in this community to provide access, especially when we look at the big umbrella of health and wellness. What can we do to promote population health within our community? Healthy preventative care, so that we're promoting health on the long term rather than just dealing with people when they're sick and in the moment.
Thank you, Caitlin. So I hope you're getting where we're leading to. This is a long game thing. It's not just hospital beds or urgent care or an emergency room or more PT and OT. It's also finding what resources we have in Saline and getting ahead of an illness or an injury. Are we advertising well enough? Are we using the rec center? Are we using this? Are we using that? To try to, make it as healthy as it can without trying to ask for something we're not going to get. Let's see here. So how do we make it work? So here's the good news. If we keep the dialogue open with the healthcare organizations, which we will, with local government bodies, what's the county doing? Are we working with our commissioners to know what they're offering? There's a lot that the county is doing for underserved populations that we haven't yet tapped into, and that will be part of what the group continues to do. If we can't offer it, we want to at least know where we can send you. That's really important. Saline doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all, but we have to know where we send you. What can we offer? We don't have it, but I can show you where you can get it. Local government bodies, are we doing what we can? Walking trails, think of how the city can be healthier. Are we voting? Are we thinking of policies and processes that make healthier communities? And then community partners. Again, the county, I keep going to the county. Shannon Beeman's been great at helping us understand what they've got available there. We haven't tapped into it as much. That will be a big chunk of what the group will continue to do. Next steps, Kelly. Kelly Shanley's is going to tell us what our next steps are. She's bossy. You should have seen her in high school.
Sorry. Thank you very much. We're just going to work on this task force and what we'd like to continue it forward and make it become a committee so that we can continue to do good work. We want to continue the dialogue, as John said, with other healthcare organization partners. And tap into our community resources, as she mentioned, the rec center, the school, all sorts of different things that we have been brainstorming and coming up with a plan. And I'm going to digress for just a minute, only because I've been here a long time. I mean, my grandfather graduated from your beloved Union School. My mom was born at what used to be the hospital that was next to Salt Springs. For me, as a member of the community, I think we need to think about, where we've been, where we were, where we're going, what we are, what we could be, and what we should be. I mean, there are a lot of people, as Caitlin mentioned, that have problems with transportation. We need to make sure that we're tapping into those people and making sure that people can get where they need to go. People can't always get to U of M or to St. Joe or wherever, and we need to make sure that we're doing what we can to provide these opportunities for people.
Oh, don't forget about the resource guide.
Oh, and yeah, we're creating a resource guide to act as an all-encompassing health and wellness repository. I was afraid I was going to screw up that word.
So again, that goes back to, thank you, Kelly. That goes back to, if we can get that on the website, that's one of our big things we're working on, which Jennifer and Nancy are kind of placeholding. Our AARP offers rides. We have our Saline shuttle, whatever, we're trying to figure out how we can use that more, that Council Member Dillon's brought up many times. Like, how are we using it? Does it need to be advertised better? Because sometimes it is simply getting to where you need to be. So different things, if we don't have it, I want one-stop shop where people know where to get it. So Saline doesn't have X, but it's here, and that's the closest one. So until we can make sure that we've got more clinicians and enough to serve our growing community, what we can do is keep a guide, an online guide, that will talk about PT and OT, different exercises. Where's the swimming pool? If I wanted to swim and have swim therapy, what are my options in Saline? So that's one of the big things we'll be working on as we move forward. If we don't have it, where can we get it for you? But it is definitely a work in progress. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Councilmember Kraus? Let me first thank you for that presentation. That was excellent. And I want to acknowledge all of the task force members and all those individuals who are with us tonight who have assisted with this important and timely initiative. I don't have any questions at this time. As I indicated earlier, this will be a topic for additional discussion and likely action at our next meeting in October. I will say there are a number of deficiencies and problems in the Saline community, which community stakeholders and city government are working aggressively to correct and or solve. But I still maintain, as I've said numerous times in the past, that perhaps the biggest deficiency is the lack of quality healthcare amenities and services. And we as a community need to do more to promote preventative medicine, health and wellness. This community, as it continues to grow and age, needs more services, and that includes emergency services, primary care physicians, pediatricians, and specialists. So a lot of work has been done here, and I thank the task force for their time and efforts thus far, but it's clear that much work remains undone. So I look forward to partnering with you and continuing to make progress on this very important issue. Mr. Delorco, can I start with you, and then I'll end with Councilmember Kamara-Sulag. Any questions for Chairperson Kraus or any members of the committee, task force rather?
Yeah, when you started talking about preventative medicine and leveraging our existing infrastructure, I had a lot of thoughts about our rec center, and I'm wondering if there have been efforts made to collaborate with the rec center and or these various healthcare organizations to partner and collaborate with delegating some space in the rec center to serve as PT or OT, because you have the equipment there, you have the staff there that are familiar with how to run everything, and if you had some trained physician's assistants in there, some sports medicine options, that might help solve two problems. One being that we have trouble keeping our rec center afloat and funding it adequately, and two being that there's a need for this in the community. So I'm just wondering how that's going.
That's a great question, and I probably should have mentioned that. We did take the Henry Ford folks through the rec center, Mayor Morrow and I can't remember who all went, and Sunshine showed us around. Carla met with us as well, but Sunshine showed us around. Killing two birds with one stone was my great idea. I'm like, the Henry Ford can swoop in and, make the recs, and that's still a possibility. They looked at what they had, weights, space. They asked about the footprint, how much acreage there was. So that is still something that is kind of being talked about. But we definitely need to leverage what we've got. If we can't get ahead of the back end when you're sick yet, if we can get to the front end at least, that's kind of where we're going with it right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbock, questions for Councilmember Kraus?
Just a couple. As you mentioned, other providers and so forth, how have our current caregivers, we have some urgent care companies that are already here, have they responded to any of our inquiries or trying to meet other needs that we say our community wants?
So the new urgent care was new right as we were kind of doing our thing, and so I have not spoken with them. I did speak with the other folks on industrial. They cover a need. They're helping out. It's a Band-Aid. We could use something more robust with hours that are later and services they provide. The biggest complaint with our current urgent care system that we have here, and we have two of them, was hours available. So they don't help. Most accidents don't occur from 8 to 4, So they're great. We appreciate them, but we need more.
And then the other question I had was regarding what kind of input or feedback you had from employers and their need for their employees and what their expectations are in terms of ability to actually even afford health care, either from being insured or underinsured.
So that's a good question. We have spoken, actually, Ms. O'Toole initially during the first survey phase was speaking with the people at Pharesia just to see, trying to bring a new healthcare organization is they need a group of people that they can count on as revenue, if that makes sense. And if a company's gonna come in, I hate to put dollars on it, but the money is tight. So we were trying to think of ways we could take the largest employers in the area and say, here's 700 dedicated or whatever, maybe do job physicals or whatever. So that has been talked about. Most of those people are already insured. They've got insurance. I can't remember where we left it, but it probably is time to tap into them again, just to see, if there's anything more we can be doing for them. Like if you're on your lunch hour, you need to go have a bone checked out, you broke a bone, I don't know, without going home to your home doctor, which might be in a different area, so.
Yeah, and even trying to understand what they have in terms of work comp and stuff like that, if they have an accident at work, so.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely on the radar.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh. Councilmember Dillon, any questions for Chairperson Kraus?
I do. First, I will start with the comment about transportation, because you've heard me talk about that over and over again. That is a very big shortcoming in this community, in my opinion. And I do think that would make a world of difference if we had better options for our community members. So I will stop there. I do have a couple questions. So when we talk about Michigan Medicine, IHA, even Henry Ford, what type of insurance do they take, and does that match with the insurance that the people in our community have? I mean, I know personally IHA, they're top tier, they're looking for the blues and such. And does that match with what the people in our community have? Because I wouldn't want to bring in and say, hey, we've got this great new facility. Sorry, none of you guys can go to it because they don't accept your insurance. So I guess I want to sort of understand that a little bit better of, it's not just what our needs are, it's like, how are we paying for this? Do we have the means to pay through our insurance and such? So I guess, I don't know if any of your data points give you any kind of information about that.
Yes, we asked that on both surveys, and actually, the Henry Ford folks that we're speaking with ran a comprehensive insurance data statistical analyses to see what we had here, to see if it would be, that's going to be the first thing they check. If the people here don't have insurance that they accept, then that's a no-go. And luckily, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but it was 97% of the people who are insured in Saline had insurance that they accept. So that was one of the first things that we asked them. The big thing, though, you bring up a good point, because it's a hospital system. So here's the problem. Henry Ford uses their own hospitals. There's one in Jackson, and the closest one east, Detroit. And so if you're injured or you need to go to the hospital, and you're utilizing the Henry Ford clinicians that would set up shop here, they would refer you to those ends, when Michigan Medicine is 20 minutes away. So here's the problem that we're having if we were to do something with Henry Ford. They would not refer to Michigan Medicine. And so that's another barrier that you're talking about, because they don't have a hospital that's local. So there's all sorts of logistics plus insurance issues.
Right, no, I appreciate that. And then my other question is, and I know this is, I think, a question that's being addressed on your current survey, which you ask, well, how far are you willing to travel? I mean, people are going to want, I want it in my backyard. I want it next door. Mm-hmm. It's sort of the parking situation all over. Everybody wants it super close. And so, I mean, that's not going to be, unfortunately, we are in a great community. We're just really close to Ann Arbor. And that's going to always be our problem. And I mean, because I've gotten a lot of feedback. You look at Chelsea. Chelsea has an IHA, a Michigan Med, and now a ProMedica all down there. And it's like, well, yes, because they're outside of the ring of service.
No, it's because they've been planning for a long time too, though. It's been on their radar. That's another big thing.
Right.
But, yeah.
And so, I mean, they're just sort of in a little bit of a different circle than we are. Mm-hmm. Even when we had Saline Hospital here, I mean, towards the end, I mean, they were just funneling people to the hospitals. I mean, they were just sort of a triage center, and they were funneling people up there. And so I don't want people to have the wrong expectation of what we're going to get in this community. Mm-hmm. And I do really appreciate what you had mentioned about hours, and trust me, my kids always get sick on a holiday weekend, always. Mm-hmm. And nothing is open. And that might be a conversation that you're able to have with the urgent cares that we have and say, based on our feedback, we really need you to be open till 10 PM.
Yeah.
Or whatever, and they may be able to, at least in the near term, kind of accommodate that.
That was one of the sticking points with the, not, again, to beat a dead horse, but this time, we have the opportunity to do things right. We said, that'd be great if you can come here, but here's what we need. If you can't meet X, Y, and Z, then it might not be a good partnership. And so when we put that in the purchase agreement for the IHA deal, that I don't know if they were comfortable with committing that. So we're trying real hard. That's a top-notch answer, but it's hard to get a commitment,
Right.
But trust me, that's top of the list. We've heard that from almost everybody. But you make a good point about expectations. That's why I talk about the certificate of need. This has been a lot hard. I'm an idealist. I'm like, healthcare, sure. I work at Michigan Medicine. We'll get you some new doctors. It's no problem. And then you get into the weeds. Then you get Allison Spork, who's no longer on our task force for time, who works with certificate of need for Michigan Medicine. And she's like, oh, no, 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 no. And then you're like, oh, no. So the certificate of need is really what's kind of hanging us up. We may not be able to bring in what we want. And so we're trying to still shoot for that. At the same time, offer suggestions. We might not be able to bring in a more robust urgent care, but we can certainly look at what we've got and get ahead of preventative medicine. So you may not need a doctor as much. What do we have? So, it's kind of the rub there,
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Dillon. Mr. Seal, I know you're a member of the task force, but any comments or questions at this time?
The only comment I'd make is that the reality that's sinking into us is that medicine is business. It's big business. It's driven by funds and where the money is, where the opportunities lie. IHA refers to IHA doctors. IHA doctors refer to other IHA doctors. Michigan Medicine doctors, I don't know, I'm not that familiar, but I assume they refer to other Michigan Medicine doctors. I'm in a position now where I'm having to see a lot of specialty doctors. And because I started in the IHA system, most of the ones I'm referred to are IHA doctors. That's the reality. Some cases I have to travel to Livonia. Some cases I have to travel to Ann Arbor. Some places I travel over to Chelsea. It depends on where the doctors are that fit the particular niche. And it's no longer a case of we in Saline would love to have all these medical facilities here in Saline close by, where they're handy, where they're convenient, where we know them on a first name basis, and they love us because we're all part of the community. It's all a business now, and it's driven on the dollars. And that's the reality we're having to face, is that if we can't provide the volume, if we can't provide the kinds of referrals that we're talking about, it's going to be very difficult for us to attract some of these services. And I hate to be the downer, but that's what we're facing. And so I don't want to overpromise to the community. We're not going to quit working because of the challenges we face, but it's going to be tough.
I appreciate that, Mr. Seal, and I do have to commend the task force, because I think you've been very measured and realistic in setting expectations and making promises, or conversely not making promises or guarantees to the community. And while it's disappointing we can't promise or guarantee more, part of the burden of being good leaders is being forthright and honest with the people you represent. So thank you for that point. Mr. Kamir Sulak, any questions for Councilmember Kraus or members of the task force?
Yes, great presentation.
Even with my typo?
You got it out of the way right at the beginning, so, hey, it was all good, very informative. I know you've been working very hard, and you have a great group, great task force working on it. Thank you so much for the hours and hours. Dawn has never said anything about how fabulous, of a team she has, and how many, what kind of a part-time job it is for you all. And I appreciate the fairness and the balance in what the challenges are and where we've been and where we're going. I do have a question. You mentioned that U of M's 5-year plan, they're going to be building another hospital or addition.
So they're building one as we speak. It's right behind the old one. It's been in the works for years. It got halted because of COVID, so they fenced it and stopped, but it's resumed now. And that's kind of their push. I don't want to misspeak. I don't know where they're at, but they plan way in advance. So I don't know if it's 5 or whatever, but yeah, that new hospital is right now where all their resources are kind of funneling.
Okay.
So it's going to be real nice.
Well, that goes to, I don't think we're too late. Maybe for U of M right now. I would love to see something soon.
I will say, not to interrupt, sorry, Kevin, but I will say, the one thing, these healthcare organizations have been super excited to continue the conversations, even though there's nothing for us right now. They are all very excited to see Saline kind of stepping up, and this is not just Saline, this is Saline area. The southwest portion of this county has a huge deficit, and that's another thing that the task force will do if they become a committee, which I hope that council will approve that, is partner with the Manchester City Council, all these other city councils, one area we haven't tapped into yet, because strength in numbers, right? It's not just for Saline, there's a whole deficit down there in the southwest portion.
Well, thank you for answering my next question, as far as who we can partner with and get the metrics to show the need.
Right.
Or to try to show the need, because obviously it gets more rural and it's harder and harder for people to get the care that they need.
We just found out Milan's IHA was closing as well. Heidi, the urgent care is closing, so that gives us more, I'm sad it's happening, but it gives us more leverage, so we'll continue to work with those community partners.
I mean, I know it's a matter of funding and maybe a product of our, economic situation right now on many fronts, but do you have a timeline in mind? I mean, 5 years sounds like a long time away, but 5 years for a hospital in Saline.
We're not going to get a hospital. Let's just put that out there. It's not happening.
All right, that's it. You popped my bubble.
We're in transition right now as I'm leaving, and the task force we are going to be electing members, or the chair and co-chair at our next meeting, and so I would like that group to set up their timeline with their future missions and aims. It's going to be honest, I think it needs to be a regular committee, because things are always coming and going, so.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, thanks for the work that you've done. I have confidence that we're going to figure something out. Probably not on the timeline that we would like, but I think the surveys are really good information, and I completed mine. Thanks for the
I know
reminder.
we're all survey sick right now, but they are looking at this stuff. So I know Henry Ford, especially, they were really interested in our survey results. So.
Yeah, well, it's good. Thank you for the fair and balanced presentation.
Councilmember Kraus, Chairperson Kraus, any additional comments?
No, thanks for letting me go over. It's a lot of information.
It is.
So.
Okay. Appreciate everyone's time very much, and more importantly, appreciate your work on this. Thank you. You're welcome to stay, but you're also welcome to leave if you prefer.
Except Dawn.
Yeah, Dawn's got to stay. Yeah.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you all. We proceed now to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Move to approve.
Moved by Gearbock to approve. Was that a second by CO?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to unfinished business item 1, agenda item 22-193, public participation policy. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the public participation policy and approve or not to approve as submitted.
I'll move to acknowledge receipt.
Moved by Gearbox simply to acknowledge receipt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dillon. City Manager O'Toole, we discussed this at our last meeting, but you care to make any additional comments for the record? No? Okay. Are there questions for the city manager? Mr. Gearbaugh?
I think you answered my question. The one concern was about the ability of an individual to speak for someone else, but the way the policy works, you can only speak once. You cannot speak for 4 or 5 people, correct?
Correct. We still don't allow stacking of time. It's one person, one opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dillon, you had a question?
Yes, I do. Just because I think just so I get clarification, because I had the same question. So it did say that in the comments, that one person can speak for another.
Correct. So someone could come up and say, I'm speaking on behalf of so-and-so, but we can't deny so-and-so their right to still come up and speak themselves. Now, that can't be combined. Someone can't come up and say, I'm speaking for X, Y, and Z in the room, and then use that to make a 9-minute presentation.
But can they come up and say, I come to the podium, I say, I'm speaking for Colleen O'Toole, use my 3 minutes, sit down, I come back up and say, okay, now I'm speaking.
No, that one person has spoken. One person can only speak one time. If they use that opportunity to say that their comments are on behalf of someone else, that's their right to do so.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. There were also a couple of comments that we talked about last week, and I just wanted to make sure that they were kind of all incorporated. One is this considered, this policy, is it participation or comment? The name of it.
This is very specific to making comments, so it's not just the participation policy.
Okay, it was just referred to in different ways. In the memo versus in the document, so I just wanted to make sure that that was how we were.
Gotcha.
doing it.
Yeah, we would be calling this the public comment policy.
Okay, perfect. And then did we get clarification about the totality of public comment?
Yes, there was an Attorney General opinion that ruled that, in another case, that setting a 30-minute limit was too short, unacceptable. So basically, the legal opinion now is you can limit the minutes per person, but not set an overall time limit.
Okay, because I know that we do that with some of our others, so we'll just. change
Yes,
the rest.
yes, I've advised Clerk Royal and Deputy Clerk Ritchie where I've seen it to make those changes.
Okay, fantastic. Then I think, I just want to make sure that we had talked about the language about reading public comments. And I want to make sure that the public understands that we're just sort of following through all of the questions we had before, so that it would be read out loud, and at the 3-minute mark, when the timer goes off, the clerk would stop. And then do we redact anything else as it appears into the public record?
Only the section which was read during the meeting would be included in the public record.
Okay,
Because the discussion on that was we can't afford someone submitting a written comment a greater right or privilege than someone coming to speak in person.
okay. Now, what happens to those public comments that we choose not to read out loud? If we choose not to read it,
If something is a breach of the public peace and it's not read because it's a breach of peace, the same rule would apply in a personal setting. They would, that person would be removed prior to the comments being concluded.
okay. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on that, and then I'm fine, thank you.
Any additional questions? Mr. Gearbaugh?
I'll go ahead one before me.
Mine were answered just now.
So we say 3 minutes in there, but the body has the ability to reduce it to 2 if it wanted to? Or 1? Or 1?
I would want to confer with legal counsel. I don't know if 1 is too short, if there's like a sweet spot that we have to hit, so to speak.
I'm just concerned when you have a large event and you have 100 people that want to speak, it turns into 300 minutes. But we can, as you're saying, we can set that to still 60 minutes or an hour and a half?
No, we cannot set the overall time limit.
Okay.
Yep.
So then we would reduce the time for the individuals if we had to.
Yes, and I can confirm whether that's allowable.
Okay, that would be the only thing that we might want to tweak in this.
Okay. Mr. Commander Select, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just for clarification, somebody can speak for somebody else or read it, and then also for their own comments.
No, one person, one comment. Whether they choose to make that comment and say they're speaking on behalf of someone else or not, they only get one comment.
And why is that?
Because that's the right that's afforded to them, is everyone has to be treated equally. We can't have one person who says that they've, gotten 5 people together and that all 5 people want to give that person the right to speak.
Right, I know there's got to be
Yeah.
a limit, it's just, I've seen that at school board meetings. Not to say that we're doing it wrong or anything. And then we can't do a maximum of time. Can there be a group of people that are talking about the same thing and combine their time?
We don't allow stacking of time. There's certainly nothing that we could do to stop a group that wants to speak on an issue. One person speaks on one point, the next person speaks on another point.
So they could speak consecutively so that their points all tie in together.
If they're that coordinated, God bless them.
They would probably be that
Yeah.
coordinated then.
Yeah, one person can make one comment, and however they choose to coordinate with other members of the audience at that time, they would be welcome to do so.
Okay. I'm not feeling too much in favor of shortening the time limit from the 3 minutes. 3 minutes goes by pretty quickly. I think that would be under extenuating circumstances. So I'm not in favor of shortening it. I want to hear what, people have to say and their thoughts. It's very important, their input. Thank you.
Any additional questions for the city manager? There are none. There's a motion on the floor moved by Gearboss, seconded by Dillon, simply to acknowledge receipt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to approve or not to approve the policy as submitted?
Move to approve.
Oh, boy. I'm going to go with Gearboss as the mover and Seal as the second. I heard you on that one, Janet. I'll get you on the next one. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? There appears to be none. All those in favor of the motion to approve as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to unfinished business item 2, agenda item 22-225, International Property Maintenance Code update. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Community Development Director Harrington and to approve or not to approve the second reading of ordinance number 845 and to adopt or not to adopt ordinance number 845.
Acknowledge, approve, adopt.
Moved by Kraus to acknowledge, approve, and adopt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Delorco. While not technically germane, City Manager O'Toole, can I put you on the spot for just a moment as it relates to Dr. Rhodes' statement and concerns that were articulated at the beginning of tonight's meeting? In and around the pandemic, as you and I have discussed on numerous occasions, our response time relating to permits declined. There have been some instances where we were less than respectful and forthright to applicants and petitioners. I think we're moving in the right direction in correcting some of those concerns, but clearly we have some more work to do. Do you want to address that before we bring Mr. Harrington up to talk about the International Maintenance Code and this and ordinance number 845?
I actually think Mr. Harrington prefers to speak to that.
Very good. If you want to touch on that issue first, Mr. Harrington, and then if you want to make some obligatory comments about 845, again, for the public's edification, council did agree to a new policy where ordinances are read twice prior to adoption. So this item was considered and discussed at our previous meeting and now is up for final adoption this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me start by acknowledging Dr. Rode and the tremendous investment that both he, the employees, and the business Quantum Signal AI have made into the city of Saline. What they've done to the Union School really is no short feat. And, we're always incredibly grateful and pleased to have them in our city and as a vital part of our community. Obviously, no supervisor enjoys hearing negative feedback about a department that they oversee or manage, but it is necessary to hear it so that we can work on improving what we need to improve. At the end of the day, I take responsibility for the performance and the behavior of the building department. However, I would like to share it with our council and the public that we are handling a tremendous workflow. If you read my monthly report, which includes figures on the building department, our year-to-date increase has been rather dramatic from this time last year. We have 51% more permits. We're at nearly 1,300 year-to-date at this moment. At this point last year, we're at 800. At this point in the year prior, we were about at 669. We are truly seeing an uptick. Between the years of 2010 and 2020, according to the ACS, we saw about an increase of 163 housing units throughout the entire city. As I'm sure many of you are aware, Lair Farms is the size of that alone, not to mention Huntington Woods, Maple Oaks, Maple Cove, et cetera. There are a tremendous amount of work items coming to the building department at the moment. That being said as well, progress is not always linear. We are going to have hiccups. We are not going to be perfect, unfortunately, as much as we strive to be. We're trying to limit as many mistakes as possible, and we are trying to get closer and closer to perfection, knowing that it is not an attainable goal, but it is one that's worth trying to get to. I know that we can and that we will be better in the future with handling permits such as Dr. Rhodes' window permit that was recently processed and avoiding mistakes. Recent add-ons like online permitting and personnel changes where we now have a full-time building inspector and code enforcement officer joint position on staff in addition to retaining the contracted inspector that we previously had will increase the amount of inspections that the building department can perform in a week, increase the amount of permits that we can review internally within a week to avoid long processes that involve us sending site plans out to consultants for review. However, due to the workflow, some of that is still going to be inevitable, and we're still trying as fast as we can to turn around permits. In the coming weeks, and I know there's more work to do. So in the coming weeks, we will continue to make better, clearer, and more comprehensive info packets to hand to people who are interested for very basic processes to us, but that can be very confusing for applicants, such as new tenant changes in multi-tenant buildings, which is a frequent point of ire with the building department, as it's not always clear to applicants what's expected of them or why it's expected. You know, learning and synthesizing and being able to apply the state building code on the spot is a challenge in and of itself and why it's a credentialed position by the state. Now, explaining that to an applicant, especially someone who's not a contractor, who might not have that knowledge of the building code, is a skill in and of itself, and it's one that we are going to continue to work on in the building department to make sure that we're providing the best customer service in addition to providing safe and habitable spaces for all residents of Saline as well as businesses. Again, I want to thank Dr. Rode for his commitment to the city, and I promise that we will continue to do better, and we will do better for our businesses, not only for you, but for around the city as well as the residents of Saline. Now, for the codes change specifically, moving from the 2017 or 2018 to the 2021, as I mentioned at the last meeting, the real benefit of this comes for our rental inspection program. It requires a carbon monoxide detector to be installed in every unit. It's obviously critical for the health of patrons, health of residents and tenants throughout our city. Carbon monoxide poisoning is not a joke. It harms animals and people alike. It can cause severe mental illness along with many other aspects and physical negativities as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that, but that is, I believe, a necessary change to make to the code to ensure safety of the tenants in our city.
Very good. Are there questions for Community Development Director Harrington? I see here several hands. Why don't I just start to my right and to my left? Go ahead, Councilmember Kraus.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a question. I just want to say it's been a transition. Since I was elected, we've had so many new department heads, and it's been a huge transition. So I have heard similar complaints as Dr. Rode. I mean, we're out there in the public talking to people. And so I think the team that we have right now is really good, but it's going to take some time to turn it around. I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kamara Sulak.
Yes, thank you. Is this a staffing issue? Are we going to need more staff with the newer developments coming on and getting occupied? And obviously, Lair Farms, you know, all of those houses are going to look like they're going to go up pretty quickly, and you know, without impacting our local businesses, to make sure that we give top-notch service, timely, but also professionally, and not, upsetting, our community members.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think that's a really difficult question to answer, and I wish I had a more straightforward answer for you. When you're hiring a staff member, you're not just looking at the next fiscal year, which I expect to be just as busy, if not as busy as this year. It's a long-term process. You're usually, when you're hiring somebody on a full-time basis, making a tremendous commitment to that person that you expect them to be in this capacity for quite some time. Now, this is a conversation that City Manager O'Toole and I have had and will continue to have about what is the best way to maximize workflow while also not committing the city to a personnel figure that we might not need in a handful of years, depending on the trajectory of this growth. The city could stop, in theory, annexing properties if it no longer wished to. At which point, there is a finite amount of growth that the city can experience.
Right. Well, I understand the efficiency that we need to provide, and as low cost. I don't want to make the mistake of being shorthanded. We've been there. We've done that, and that's something we're improving on. I want to make sure that we're proactive. I don't want to spend any more money than we need to, but if we need staff, if that's the issue, and we're growing, and that position will be, have more and more responsibilities, I'm sure that you'll take that seriously. For sure. That we're not a dollar short and a day late.
Absolutely. I think that's what our investments into things like online permitting applications.
With the BSNA?
With BSNA, so the applicant can apply directly online. It goes right into our system. It really speeds up the clerical end of work. In addition to some of these other programs that we're doing, such as rental inspection ordinances, which catch these issues before they kind of blow up in the building department's face, as a crisis mode where it takes weeks to resolve these issues and makes it harder to spend attention on, the regular things that we do in the department. So I think that the investments that we're making now will kind of show us the trajectory going forward. Is this a staffing issue, or are there ways that we can better, handle our time as a department and better share information with folks to kind of save us time on the back end of these problems?
Okay, great. Ben, I want to say that I appreciate your accountability and really addressing, identifying the problem. And while it's been, you've been in this position for a short amount of time, we're not going to lay the blame on you, but I think that goes a long ways in transparency and just your commitment to the position and making, solving the issue. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Commander Sulak. Mr. Seo, any questions or comments for Community Development Director Harrington?
Question first and then a comment. The crux of the matter then is just the additional requirement for carbon monoxide detectors?
That is correct. I think there might be some other minor tweaks in the International Property Maintenance Code, but obviously we'll disseminate that information to property owners as we know, or as we learn of any other minor tweaks that there might be. But there's nothing substantial. It is by no means a total rewrite of what we already have in place.
Right, okay. Then the other is, the comment is that one thing that really disturbs me about what Dr. Rhodes said is not necessarily the fact that we stumbled, because I know everybody does, but the fact that some people are afraid to come forward for fear of retribution. That to me signifies a totally different problem that I think must be taken care of if it's occurring.
Absolutely. Retaliation would not be a tolerated act of our building department.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dillon, any questions or comments?
Thank you. First, I do want to make mention, because Dr. Rode had come before the Historic District Commission with his window issue. And I think that is a great lessons learned opportunity of where the city can do a better job of communicating between the building department and HDC, and also putting that avenue out to people that live within historic districts or own historic buildings, so that all three pieces of that, stool are kind of working together to keep it in balance. It was a little disturbing to know that things weren't kind of flowing the way HDC would not know what was going on with building. We've already had issues working the other way where HDC has approved things not knowing that they had to go back to build. And so I think we can kind of work a little bit better from that process. And that's just, creating a little bit more of a process for it. But I do want to say, because I always like to end things on a good note, is that kudos to you, because you have identified some issues. I think that creating a permits, the online permitting program, is going to definitely streamline some of your processes. And I think that's going to leave people to do the job they need to do and not necessarily be double inputting data and such. So I'm looking forward to seeing the positive outcome of that process and everybody working together.
Thank you. Councilmember Gearbaugh, any questions or comments regarding this issue?
Just a couple. And before I get into talking about Dr. Rhodes' concerns, do we have any other codes or such that this nature that we need to bring up to date? I do know we had an issue with water runoff and even drainage, and I know our engineering was talking about that. At any point, will we be adopting those new?
So those would be under the engineering design standards, which are separate from the state building code. So historically, we've adopted this in conjunction with the state updating the building code. So the state would update to the 2021 version. We would update ours to the 2021 version as required, and then we would also update the IPMC code along with that. But the state does not mandate that the IPMC code, the International Property Maintenance Code, be enforced. So townships, for example, don't always adopt the International Property Maintenance Code because it's not their prerogative to do so. So no, at this time, there's no other codes from the Building or Community Development Department that would need to be updated as we're awaiting the state to make a decision on the state building code, which would then include electrical, mechanical, and plumbing codes as well. But the engineering review standards are similar to like our site plan review standards, where they're a little bit more abstract and subject to different municipalities.
As to the concerns, Dr. Rhodes brought them forth at a risk management group and identified those, and we felt those were clearly issues that need to be addressed at this point when he mentions talking to us a week or 2 weeks ago. As you know, I've been working and made notice to both the city manager and yourself as a member of Planning Commission that you have implemented a number of checklists and processes that are helping us improve that. We have to admit, it was open for a long period of time, and during that period of time, it fell short. And as we start to move forward, I think both our city manager and yourself have made a number of strides in it. You're dealing with issues in terms of how to assign assignments, to develop staffing concerns and issues and dealing with those. Is it a little too late? We can't say it's too late. Unfortunately, we have to do it as fast as we can in trying to bring it up to speed. But I agree with my council members that we should, at this type of situation, ramp up and then we ramp down. That's how the building department always should work and provide that. I know there's an issue about cost and such, but when we can't be able to provide the basic services to which we know that we can charge more for, or we can actually accomplish it, we should be able to do that. And I do not want to have any concerns in the public that we would be looking to cut corners or short corners. Safety is our primary need as we talk about doing building and codes. It's just consistency and applying those as an approach, and I think you've started to do that, and it's bringing technology to the advance to the forefront. We have been lacking that in not only your department, but other departments, and so our new people that are on board see that, and I think we're reaching that, and we are going to obtain those quicker than I think we have in the past. So appreciate what you're doing, but Dr. Rhodes' concern is not something I have not been discussing for the last 3 or 4 months. So we are, as a result of you, trying to improve. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeLorco, any comments or questions?
Real briefly, Mr. Harrington, I want to applaud you for coming on board in such a short amount of time, identifying where the deficiencies are and looking for efficiencies and ways to streamline, to free up the bottlenecking issue that is really a primary concern for a lot of business owners and residential homeowners that pull permits. I think you're doing everything you can on that front. But when we listen to the comments made at the public comment by Dr. Rhodes earlier, there's another piece to that, which centers on the approach and the tone and tenor of the inspections. When I hear things like rude gotcha tactics, that's alarming to me, and I assume to you as well, as something that could be toxic to the economic growth and development of the city of Saline. I want to know if you share that perspective, and if you do you see that as a cultural problem, a systemic issue in the department that it's going to take a long time to rectify, or is this more of a personnel issue that can be remedied quickly?
I would say that it's, I don't know if it's necessarily either. Like I said, I think there's a tremendous workflow. There's a lot of pressure on our guys right now to get it right and to get it done quickly. And like I said, I think it's a challenge to not only know the code, but then apply it in different contexts. It's one thing to be talking to a contractor who knows better. In an example, for example, if they're a licensed contractor that they needed to pull a permit. It's another thing to be talking to a business owner. And I think that's a skill, and communication in and of itself is a skill that we can work on as a department and that we can do. But I don't think it's the intent of any inspector in our staff to be mean or to be rude or to belittle somebody else. And I apologize to any business or any resident who's felt like that's the way that it's come across to them. I think they're trying to do their jobs, and they're trying to ensure the safety of it. And sometimes they might miss when they're trying to explain something in a way that they think you'll understand, or maybe they believe that you are trying to skirt the rules. But obviously, that's not the right way to approach people, and we should be doing so in good faith. And that's a message I give to them on a daily basis, and one that I think we're seeing improvement on, and hopefully we'll continue to see improvement on going forward.
Okay, because I think I share the idea, as well as a lot of my council colleagues, that people want to do the right thing. They want to understand what the expectations are. They want to correct the deficiencies, and the next time they come around, they want to have a green light to move forward. And however we can accomplish that through a symbiotic relationship with the person that pulls the permit and the person doing the inspection, so that's a civil process moving forward without acrimony, that's obviously what we all want to see.
Right, I think that's what we always aim to do. I would just add that the additional layer of context here, that we do have contractors that we know of in the city, that frequently do not pull permits, that we frequently are assessing double permit fees for or citing, and we have property owners that act in that same way. And that's not to put a blanket over everybody, and that's not how we should treat everybody. But like I said, I think there sometimes reaches a critical mass where our inspectors, aren't giving that good faith effort, or not believing that the person's approaching them in good faith. And like I said, that's really where that needs to change. And I think that's something that we just need to be reminded of as a team and as a group of inspectors that we have here, is that, and like I said, I believe it's gotten better from when I started, and I believe it is only going to continue to get better. Where we're thinking about tone and audience and how we're approaching those situations with different groups of people.
Yeah, if the contractors are trying to cheat the system and they knew better, that's different. I mean,
No, for sure. And like I said,
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's a mistake of believing that somebody's trying to cheat the system when they're not. But I'm not going to throw the inspectors under the bus or say that we have a systemic issue, because I don't believe that to be true. I think it's a matter of context and sometimes reframing where you're at in the day.
okay, thank you.
Let me just wrap this up before we proceed with the motion that's on the floor, moved by Kraus, seconded by Del Orco, to acknowledge, approve, and adopt. The change is perfunctory in nature. I don't think any reasonable person would object to adopting ordinance number 845. To the broader concerns that were raised by my friend Dr. Rhodes, I think my position over the years has been very clear. I think it's incumbent upon government to extend a helping hand to the private sector to try and cooperate and to support those who are attempting to bring amenities, services, and jobs to our community. I'm reminded of a quote from one of my heroes, Paul Tsongas, who said that those of us in government sometimes get so fixated on passing out the golden eggs that we forget about the health of the goose. No goose, no golden eggs. The subtext being, if you want the revenue to support all the vital services that we rely on, you have to have a healthy economy, you have to have strong, stable businesses, and government has to help nurture that, a robust and diverse local economy. So whatever we need to do to support you in your ongoing efforts to improve community relations, to streamline processes in the building, in the community development department, and to improve customer service, please don't hesitate to come back to us. And I would also note, because this was articulated earlier this evening, if there are other contractors or businesses that have had less than ideal interactions or experiences with our community development department, please reach out to Community Development Director Green, or in his absence, Harrington. Gosh, my goodness, excuse me. Community Development Director Harrington. I mean, no disrespect when I refer to you as Mr. Green, so it's not pejorative. In his absence, the city manager, because we do need to hear that feedback. We can't make improvements unless we hear both the positive and the constructive criticism of anything that falls within our municipal portfolio. So, thank you. If there's nothing further on this particular item, we do have a motion on the floor, moved by Kraus, seconded by Del Orco, to acknowledge receipt, to approve, and to adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 1, which is agenda item 22-227, well number 7 installation. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the cover memo from wastewater treatment superintendent Briggs, and to approve or not to approve the installation of well number 7 by Peerless for $172,500 under the City of Saline Emergency Procurement Ordinance, Section 2-171, and to authorize, not authorize the city treasurer to amend line item 591-999-998-003 in the same amount.
Move to acknowledge, approve, and to authorize.
Moved by Gearbaugh, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, to acknowledge, approve, and to authorize. Is there a second to that
I'll
motion?
second that.
Was that by Commander Sulak? Thank you, sir. Mr. Briggs, you care to make a brief comment for the public record?
Just very briefly, we are in need of another well because of well number 4 failure. So I think we need to move this as quickly as we can.
Good, and the city manager has messaged on this item previously, and I believe several of her weekly communiques. Are there questions for city staff regarding this issue? Councilmember Dillon?
Thank you. Just very quickly, there's an additional proposal that'll be coming for some additional work.
Correct.
Mentioned in the memo. Do
Correct.
you have any idea what that is going to cost?
I don't have a quote yet, no. I'm just shooting in the dark that it's going to be another maybe 50 to 75,000, I'm not sure.
Okay.
We've got to have an enclosure around the top of the well. And I had considered taking the old well house down, but after talking to one of the contractors, he thinks it would be more cost-effective to leave that as a junction box basically for the power and everything else instead of having to run new all the way out from the building. So we'll probably leave that building standing, make some modifications to it on the interior and the exterior wall, but basically put a hut over the well and hook the pipe up and hopefully be able to go when Eagle says we can.
And so that leads into my next question. What is the time frame to have this well online?
Well, the problem is I don't have a time frame yet because we haven't got the permit from Eagle, so I'm not sure exactly how long that will take. But I'm hoping a matter of months as opposed, 2-3 months maybe. But there's a lot of hoops to jump through.
Right, no, I understand. And well 4 will just be, so it'll be abandoned in place, and will this be just next to it?
Yes, it'll be just a short distance from the well, just a little bit to the north.
Okay. And if we were to at some point create another water tower, would it be in that same area? Would it be, I mean, is there any correlation to, like, well, we should be looking at putting a well where we would be putting a water tower or anything to that?
I don't really think it matters as far as where the water tower is for the wells are because the wells have to run to the water plant anyway. So that locality is more important than, say, putting a new water tower someplace on the outskirts of the city to benefit the population. You're going to have to run a pipe over that way anyway. So it's going to have to come from the water treatment plant.
Awesome, thank you
Or-
very much.
Another connection in between, so.
Any additional questions for Superintendent Briggs? Mr. Commander Sulak?
Thank you. So our contractor Peerless, they are one of our approved contractors?
Correct.
So this was a single bid?
Yes.
And do we have a breakdown of how much the materials and how much the labor is? I'm just sort of curious.
I don't have a complete breakdown yet. I do know we're gonna try and conserve as much money as we can. The motor from well 4 should be usable for well 7, so that's, that little bit of stuff there is gonna save us some money. Like I say, I don't exactly have concrete costs, a breakdown. I can get it to you if you'd like to see it.
Okay. Yeah, if it's not too much trouble.
Sure.
All right. Thank you. That's it.
Any additional questions? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Can you just clarify what, again, happened to well 4?
Well,
So the public knows.
well 4 had a split in the casing about 20 feet long. And when I contracted with Peerless to try and repair it, they were going to put a sleeve in it. And to do that, you have to put the sleeve in and then put grout around the outside of the sleeve to hold it in place, obviously. And before we even did it, I was told that, there's a chance this, something could go wrong because things go wrong, surprise. But they'd done several of these, and had no issues. But somehow the grout had migrated, we believe, through the split in the casing, down the outside of the well and into the bottom of the well. And enough of it had gotten there that it had basically sealed it off. They made an attempt to try and mechanically remove it, and it just wasn't going to happen.
Thank you. At least we made an attempt to try and preserve the well that we had,
Yes.
and do it as cheap as we could, but unfortunately, it had a significant risk to
did.
it. So
It did.
appreciate you doing that work and look forward for the other well to be done. Is there anything we need to do in terms of Eagle? Further
No,
pressure?
right now, Peerless is in the process. They have to drill a test well to do a profile of where they're gonna drill. And actually, kind of a pain, you have to have 2 test wells. You have to have one here and then one at like 90 degrees from where you're gonna run. So there's 2 test wells, but the first test well is to get the profile to get the permit. So I have not talked to DC to find out exactly when that's gonna happen.
But right now, we're adequate with what we have with our wells, but if another one was to shut down, then we'd have a big
We'd have problems, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? There appear to be none. Is there any subsequent discussion on the motion? Bill, thank you very much. There's a motion on the floor moved by Gearboss, seconded by Kamir Sulak to acknowledge, to approve, and to authorize. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 2, agenda item 22-228, stormwater asset management proposal. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Engineer Humphreys and to approve or not to approve the proposal from OHM for stormwater asset management services at an amount not to exceed $45,000.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Gearboss to acknowledge and to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by CO. In City Engineer Humphreys' absence, Ms. O'Toole, do you care to make a comment?
Certainly. So this is the proposal that goes along with the grant funding that we received from the Southeast Council of Governments, SEMCOG. It does look at reviewing approximately 46 miles of gravity sewer that we have, inventorying our system a bit better, and then also, as has been sort of our priority for this fiscal year, incorporating some of that information into our GIS systems. $36,832.50 will be covered by the grant, so our portion is just, I'm not going to pretend I can do that math off the top of my head, guys.
That's right. That's right. The only thing I would add is when Mr. CO and I attended the most recent SEMCOG General Assembly, we were notified on that occasion that we would receive the grant, and then we subsequently received confirmation in writing. I can confirm that it was a very competitive process, and a number of municipalities did not receive funding, so kudos to staff for their hard work on this. Are there any questions for the city managers? Mayor Pro Tem Gearboss.
I think the only question, this is really helping to tweak upon our existing report also, right?
Correct, yeah, we have conducted previous asset management plans related to stormwater systems, but there's certainly some deficiencies within that system. Director Searles is here if we have more specific questions related to that, but really, this is about inventorying existing conditions and getting that information into GIS.
Yeah, this is adding upon what we've already accomplished, it's not repeating what we've done.
Correct.
Additional questions? Councilmember Dillon.
Mr. Gearbaugh just answered my first one, so my next question is, just for clarification, so it's 45 minus the 36 that we're getting, correct?
That's our portion, yeah. Our portion is
So
roughly
we're
like
paying like,
$8,000.
$8,000, is that what you're?
No, we're getting 36,000, and our portion is the 8,000-ish.
Right. So when we say economic impact, 45,000 from the general fund.
Because that's how it will show up on our budget.
Right. But it's not really truly that. I just wanted the clarification.
Correct.
We didn't have to kick in 45.
Correct.
To match the SEMCOG.
Yeah, but if you remember when we accepted the grant, we already made the amendment to the budget, so it'll show us 45 and 45 on both ends.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Any additional questions? Any comments on the motion? It's been properly moved then by Mayor Pro Tem Gearboss, seconded by Councilmember CO to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 3, agenda item 22-229, a temporary liquor license. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Clerk Royal and to approve or not to approve the temporary liquor license request by Allison Paldino on behalf of Charity Ball for the Charity Ball for a cause for an event that will be held on October the 28th, 2022.
Move to acknowledge.
Moved by Dillon to acknowledge. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Kamir Sulak. Clerk Roy, would you like to begin? Is the petitioner applicant here and/or a representative? The record will reflect there or not. Okay, go ahead. My apologies, Clerk Roy.
This is for a charity event that's going to be held at La Fontaine. I think it's, yeah, La Fontaine. And it's going to be on their premises, but since it has alcohol, it does need to go through City Council to be approved.
Very good. Are there questions for the City Clerk? Councilmember Dillon.
So I know that this organization has done events in the past. I've actually attended those events. So I have a couple of questions. First, is this an individual or is the organization that just has a name for their organization? Is it an actual organization to whom we are issuing the liquor license?
Yes,
approval to?
it's an organization.
Okay, so they're an LLC, a 501, there's something, okay. So then with that, they would be carrying all their own insurance and such? Okay. And then my only other question really is, and it's very just high level, of what is the city's criteria for granting these? So, I mean, all that came in our packet was that the city has done is that the police chief has signed off on it. So is there anything else from our community development department or anything like that that we're supposed to be doing?
I mean, as a purely private event, really all we're asked to look at in signing off on the liquor license is whether we believe that it poses any sort of, I guess, I won't say threat, but, you know, a public safety issue or nuisance, yeah.
Okay.
Certainly, you know, if someone was proposing to host a rave, we might look a little bit more closely at something like that, and may deny a liquor license in that case.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's what I was just trying to figure out is, so we don't really have any guidelines as to, oh, it has to be this, or it has to be a charity event. So if it was not a charity event, if it was not a fundraiser, would we still do it?
I mean, hosted purely on private property, well, that's going to be different because then the liquor license rules are different. If it's a private event for profit, I believe that there's different rules through Laura that they have to go through.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we were kind of just applying generally. So if I was having a grad party at whatever business it was, would I still file like, would the process look the same? Would the city have that level of involvement? I guess I'm just trying to understand.
If people aren't paying for alcohol or there isn't like a ticket to the event, then no.
Okay, just understanding that. Thank you very much.
Any additional questions? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Do we require any kind of alcohol overview or servers?
Laura does. If you're going through this process, they do require that you have, I think on each shift you need to have. Yep.
Any additional questions? Mr. Sulak?
Yeah, so has the special license fee always been, that's $25?
That's not our fee, that was for the state of Michigan.
State of Michigan? Okay. So as a city, we don't have any fees?
Not for this liquor license request, no.
All right. And is that typical as far as the city's time and? Okay. That's all I wanted to understand. Thank you.
Any additional questions from the dais? Record will reflect there are none. There's a motion on the floor simply to acknowledge receipt. Moved by Dillon, second by Sulak. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to approve or not to approve?
Move to approve.
Moved by Del Orco to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Sulak. Is there any additional discussion? There is not. All those in favor of approving say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Let's transition now to the discussion portion of our agenda. First up is Commission, Committee, and Task Force reports from Council. It's only been a week, but I'll call on each of you. I'll start to my right and end to my left. Councilmember Kraus, any Commission, Committee, or Task Force reports?
Well, you just heard a lot about healthcare, so, and arts and culture meets tomorrow, so I'm good.
Okay, Mr. Sulak?
Yes, the DEI is going to start having, hosting a book, like a book club, a book reading and a movie reading starting in October. It's September, just seems to be flying by. And then the Saline Youth Council will be meeting here tomorrow. That's it, thank you.
Mr. Seal, any Commission, Committee, or Task Force reports?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Councilmember Dillon?
Yes, Historic District Commission met last Thursday, and one thing I'd like to remind, I sort of touched upon this a little bit, is that homeowners need to be sure and confirm that their contractors actually have permits before work is started. That's becoming an issue, that was a big issue that came before HDC, that was very detrimental to the Historic District. So the onus really has to be on those homeowners to make sure that their contractors have adequate permits before working. And then the other one was that at our last meeting, I talked about attending the Andalina Farms meeting. And I neglected to look on the back side of my page and realized that there were other notes that I was supposed to mention, so I apologize. What I had forgotten to mention was that one thing that's going to become very apparent right now with Andalina Farms about to come online and 250 homes, and then probably some other development happening to the west of the city, is that the city is really going to need to explore traffic plans moving forward for the west side. And that really is going to need to be a collaboration with MDOT as well as the Washtenaw County Road Commission, and looking at options to be able to successfully move a great deal of traffic through a very congested small area of town.
Thank you. Mr. Gearbock, Commission, Committee, or Task Force reports?
Just a couple from planning. We approved 2 special use permits for dog grooming services, one in the Bushes Plaza, and then another one in, would formerly been a daycare center, but it's behind the, will be our new marijuana, formerly Mickey's Dairy Twist on the west side of town. There are no concerns. Those will be coming to council, I believe, the first meeting in October?
Might be the second
Because of
reporting requirements.
posting, yep. So those are fairly straightforward. And then our risk management, as I mentioned earlier, met last Friday and discussed issues regarding the fire department and trying to break out some additional aspects related to infrastructure and public safety.
Thank you. Councilmember Delorco, any Commission, Committee, or Task Force reports?
No activity since our last meeting.
Okay, let's transition to reports or announcements. Councilmember Kraus?
No.
Councilmember Kamir Sulak?
No.
Councilmember Seal?
No.
Councilmember Dillon?
No.
Well, just a huge thank you to everybody who came out, supported, and helped to organize the 2022 Oktoberfest. I don't believe that Main Street or the organizers have official numbers at this juncture, but from my perspective, it was a phenomenal success. There were great crowds there on both Friday night and all day Saturday. The Saline Lindenberg Friendship Guild sold out of food very early on Friday, and then by 7:30 on Saturday. I suspect it was one of the most successful fundraising events that group has had since it first began participating in Oktoberfest. So again, special thanks to everybody who attended, and more importantly, those who helped to organize the event. Mr. Gearbaugh, reports or other announcements?
One promotion for our harvest time out at the Renchlick Farm. That'll be October 2nd. We mentioned that. Well, no, we won't meet before then, but looking forward to doing our annual event out there. Hopefully we'll have a hayride. We're having an issue with the tractor, but old things need to be fixed. And then the other thing I just want to mention, and I found out today, that our fellow council member, Ms. Dillon, was appointed to the MML Elected Officers Academy a few months ago, and I did not realize that. That is a very much an honorable position to hold, because MML and training other individuals on how to provide our services that we do is one of the best things that MML does for us in order to bring about, knowledge and activities for us to make sure that we do our job as well as we can. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Congratulations, definitely. Mr. Delorco, any other reports or announcements?
No.
Okay. City Hall accessibility, I added this to the agenda. It's an item that Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, myself, and the city manager discussed when we had our agenda meeting last week, Wednesday. I have been concerned for a number of months now that there have been times early in the evening when the outside doors of City Hall have been locked between 5:30 and 7 o'clock. So I think there needs to be a formal policy. I think during the early evening hours especially, City Hall should be open and accessible. There are a number of people who attend meetings. There are also a number of people who come in to grab building permits, drop off absentee ballots, or pay bills. There was no, unless Mr. Gearbaugh objects, there was no disagreement when we discussed this that a policy needs to be in place and that City Hall needs to be open, accessible during the early evening hours. City Manager O'Toole, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Is there anything more you'd like to say about this?
No, just a clarification, though. Is it really a policy or more of a departmental procedure you're looking to accomplish? Whichever keeps the doors open?
Yes, whatever keeps the doors open, yeah.
Because I think the idea is being able to monitor that. So between 9, we haven't decided on a time. You should be able to set it depending on what the needs are in the meetings.
But I'm especially concerned about people who may want to attend public meetings. And generally, Monday through Thursday, we have some sort of board or public entity that's meeting here. And as we've noticed at recent meetings, people are pretty savvy and smart. They see where their agenda item appears on any given agenda, and oftentimes they won't be here when the meeting starts, but they come maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours later. and this building needs to be accessible to them. It's the people's building. Any comments on that, Councilmember Dillon?
So just in the meantime, until we have a policy in place, if people were to come and the door is locked, there is a intercom button, correct?
Correct.
That you can press that will ring to dispatch and they can buzz you in. So you're not locked out forever. You still can come to our meetings and make public comment. But I am in favor of having some sort of policy in place.
Okay. I think we're all in agreement. This building and our public meetings ought to be as accessible as possible. We shouldn't be putting up barriers that prevent people from participating, attending, or accessing this building. If there's nothing further on that point, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, you asked to add traffic enforcement to the discussion item, so the floor is yours.
Yeah, this is last week, and this has been a discussion I've had with our chief and also with City Manager O'Toole. And I may be a little more emphatic about it because I've been watching traffic on South Ann Arbor Street, and it's incredible about the distracted drivers and the speeding and almost the accidents that occurred while Wright Tree Trimming Service was trying to, maintain our trees in the roadway, and just the disregard for the safety items that were set up for that. But it's not just that, it's also, the overweight trucks that are now approaching on South Ann Arbor Street that we didn't have in the past because we had actual enforcement of that. But also, one of the things during the during Oktoberfest, the number of cars that blew through the red lights was ridiculous. I can't imagine how many, when you stand there and you watch the walk signal turn white, and there were 3 cars that continued to proceed, and I was at the intersection 3 different times, and that occurred every time. And we had an event going on that makes it even more scarier. And then the other thing is, we're seeing asphalt damage up, or whatever is turning around the corner on North Ann Arbor onto Michigan Avenue is just leaving all kinds of tar and just destroying whatever we did for markings. And I don't know what that is, but you can actually see, it looks like just black coming across. I guess for me as understanding, we knew with COVID that we had, there were issues and concerns with traffic enforcement, and of course, there's issues with concerns about profiling and all of that. I just believe that we're getting to a point, and this isn't unique on my street or on any other streets, that traffic enforcement needs to be reconsidered in terms of how we are going to handle that and to protect our citizens. Both of my neighbors have sold their homes, and one of the biggest concerns from them was, as they said it, failure of the police to enforce it, but more it's the issue of their concern because younger children are on that road, and South Ann Arbor Street and a number of the other streets are very pedestrian friendly and a number of pedestrians on it, and I think we need to figure out how to step up or do something in order to address this type of concern.
Thank you for sharing that. City Manager O'Toole or Chief Radzik, who's in the audience, do either of you care to respond? Chief? Make sure that green light is illuminated at the base. Chief
It's
Radzik.
on, yes. So I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. It's not anything that I haven't heard before. We have competing, I get complaints from Huntington Woods, complaints on Woodland, so I have 2 officers per shift. I can look at maybe designating a traffic officer. I don't know what that looks like right now with minimal staffing. We have a new officer coming on board, but that person will not be trained for 4 months. He should be starting October 8th. But again, I go by the stats. I think everybody on council gets them. I do a report every 15th of the month. It gets turned into the city manager, and it does show. So I kind of take it to heart about the failure of my police officers to enforce traffic because my stats show me that they are. And as a matter of fact, the last time we had a conversation about this, our traffic crashes were down. So I'd have to say that it's safer. I know we have a lot of work to do, and, in the downtime that the officers have, wherever I'm getting complaints is where I usually designate them to spend their time in patrol and stop vehicles, so.
And I think for me is understanding where we are in our staffing, and I know we've had staff off because of leave, we've had staff that left, and are we fully complemented now, or do we still have an open position?
We will be when we get the next officer on, until perhaps the school wants a school resource officer after probably the first of the year, so.
And I think that'll be a discussion that we want to talk about in terms of where we put resources. And in that case, if the schools are willing to pay for the entire position, that might be something that's adoptable. But I think we also are looking at overall structure of everything at this point in time, so. But again, these are statements that were made to me by citizens, and I'm just having to repeat them. And at this point, I don't want to necessarily say that we can't do better, but it's the issue
We
of
can always do better.
why can't we, and what do we need to do in terms of providing either additional resources or better tools.
Any additional comments from the dais? Councilmember Kraus?
So I just want to push back a little bit. I live on Henry, and we have similar issues as where Dean lives. And they're serious issues, we know this, so I don't mean to poo-poo the safety part of this. But 2 officers at one time, so narrative like failure to enforce is pejorative. These guys work, and they go where they're needed. So I want to also make sure that we're using the right narrative here. They're not failing to enforce, they're enforcing where they can, when they can. We've got other neighborhoods. I've had complaints on my own street. I've also had some Huntington Woods constituents reach out recently and ask what could be done. I know the Woodland, not Woodland, where we put the new school zone in, sorry, it's late.
Maple?
You know, where we put the new school, yeah, Woodland, yeah, that was
Yep,
right.
Woodland.
I'm still getting emails from folks out there about the school zone. So it's not failure to enforce, it's failure to have enough people to enforce constantly everywhere all over the city. Because that made it sound like, you know, they're not doing anything, which we know is not true. On Henry, I've called and have had asked for extra protection or extra patrols or whatever. And so they'll do that. I'll see them real heavy-handed for a few days, but then they're kind of gone. I don't think, oh, they just ditched us, but it's like they can't sit on Henry 24/7. So I just want to make sure that we're, you know, not pejoratively speaking against the police department, that they're not covering. They're not failing to enforce. They're doing the best they can with the numbers they have.
Let me jump to Councilmember Dillon, who had her hand up, and then if Mr. Gearbaugh has some additional thoughts, we would welcome that.
Sure.
Councilmember Dillon.
Well, I wanted to talk about, one of the things that came up this morning, there was actually a public forum about the road millage, and there was a conversation that happened about the 4 corners and the timing of lights and whether or not. So I want to address that issue because there are drivers that are saying that, and that is something that's sort of outside of, explaining to people, that's sort of outside of our scope. We can take that information and we can give it to MDOT, and MDOT can decide if, you know, what they want to, how they want to control those signals. Because I will be the first to say, and I will, what Mr. Gearbaugh said, that we have, you know, when we did the Michigan Avenue makeover, we looked at some traffic study type scenarios, and traffic's going to stack on North and South Ann Arbor Street, so we got to move things through. We have to move it through. Well, what we didn't do there, so what we did was we kept the greens going north-south longer, but there's no turn arrows. So those people that are going across the intersection are just going. Anybody that wants to turn now is waiting, and they're going through a red light, and you will have every day 2 to 3 people going through a red light because they've now sat through their light 3 times and they feel like it's their turn. So I think there's avenues that we can explore as a community, and hopefully we can get MDOT to kind of agree to it with us. I do also want to acknowledge what Mr. Gearbaugh said about the road markings. That's way beyond police, but just Monroe Street is terrible right now, where I don't know where the Cadillac asphalt trucks are coming from and going to, but it is absolutely terrible. It's basically taking the white markings off of the intersection. So I think at some point somebody's going to need to look at that. As far as, you know, traffic enforcement, I mean, yeah, we're sort of caught between a rock and a hard place. We don't have enough officers to patrol every area all the time, so we kind of pick and choose, and that's why we did some of the speed signs and such, and those are a bit of a deterrent. I do remember at one point when we were having a lot of problems with Henry Street, we had talked about some visuals and beyond the street striping, where you make it look like there's a speed bump or a table, those are painted, because I know that we're not, I believe, I should say, that we're not allowed to have like a speed bump in the middle of South Ann Arbor Street. Because that would, you hit that once and people are not gonna do it again. I've been told that we can't do that because of fire equipment, but I don't know. I mean, I guess looking at different options like that, whether we can actually put something there, speed tables, speed bumps, or we can paint them to look like they're there and people are going to naturally slow down for them. But I do think that we have an abundance of truck traffic coming through our community right now. Every single day as I sit at the light at Michigan Avenue and Industrial, I watch gravel haulers blow through that light every single day because they're going 60 miles an hour and they can't stop. And so I think we're gonna have to look at that too, and maybe talking to some of these local vendors, these trucking companies, and saying, hey, we've got a problem with you coming through our community. You know your drivers are doing this. Because they may not, unless they have recording devices in their vehicles, they may not even know that's happening. So I'd like to look at a lot of options. I do think we need to figure out some kind of solution.
Mr. Gearbaugh, any additional comments?
I wanted to bring this forward because not only do we want to address this, and I know what our staffing issues and concerns are, but I would feel that we, as having heard these from comments from citizens and so forth, don't want to treat this any differently than what Dr. Rhodes just mentioned to us tonight. We need to nip it in the bud before it becomes something of a concern. It was like the water quality issue and the other ones. Once we know something is an issue that's really stirring some pots, we need to put a cover on it.
Mr. Steele, you want to wrap up this conversation?
Just a quick comment. I had a chance last week to spend considerable time with a previous chief of police from here, about 3 or 4 chiefs ago. And in our discussion, we were talking about this very topic. And he said, do you remember what the most often cited complaint of the public is, regardless of where the police department is? Traffic. So we all see it, we all know about it, and we all know that the police can't be there to stop every single one every single time. So I guess I'm saying this on your behalf, Marlene, so you don't feel like you're being publicly filleted here.
I appreciate it. We'll do better.
Mr. Delarco?
I just have a question for clarification on the issue with the trucks. I'm confused about whether there are or were axle weight limits that we can no longer enforce, or what the case there is, because on Henry and South Ann Arbor, there's a lot of truck traffic, and I don't even think they're supposed to be on those roads.
I think the weight restriction is different going from northbound to southbound. One of the issues we have right now is we have one officer that's trained in motor carrier, and he will be retiring in December.
Okay.
So,
Chief, is it a goal to have in anticipation of that retirement, either in the third quarter of this year or the first of the subsequent, is it a priority to have another individual or individuals trained?
we would like to get somebody trained. It's a matter of finding a school and then having staffing to allow for them to attend the school. Yes.
Yeah, the truckers just think it's free reign. It's crazy.
Well, Chief, you've heard our concerns. Maybe you can confer with your command staff and officers and perhaps report back on some additional solutions or measures that could be taken to mitigate this issue. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Is there anything else to be brought up under discussion this evening? If not, then we come to the second public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments? The record will reflect there are none. I would note we do have, I think my colleague, Councilmember Dillon made reference to this. We did have a street millage town hall earlier this morning at the Senior Center. We have one next week at the library, so please attend if you're interested. We also have some material online, including a flyer that nicely summarizes the issue, what the problem is, what we've done to correct the deficiency, and how we're allocating funds and how we intend to allocate funds in the future. Please note our upcoming meetings, and at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn this regular meeting at 8:51 p.m.
So moved.
Moved by Dylan, seconded, was that CO?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned.